elected
Recording
officials'
in progress.
offices. The City Budget Office has also updated their equity scoring tool this year. So these tools are just another way for the city to institutionalize equity and ensure we are centering communities of color in our budget discussions, because as we all know, you can gauge an organization's priorities by examining where they put their funding. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Director Selby. So if there are no other questions, I will turn it over to Director Andrea Durbin from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Director Kennard. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's presentation on the work the city is doing to support and create better connected communities and livable neighborhoods. I want to thank the council clerks for driving today's presentation this afternoon, and you can go ahead and start that presentation now. I'm Andrea Durbin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director for Planning and Sustainability for the city. And the City Budget Office asked me to help convene and coordinate this briefing because there are so many bureaus doing important work that improves the livability of our city and helps create connected communities. We appreciate the opportunity to share and discuss this work with you. This afternoon's presentation will be divided into two parts with time for questions and a break in between. Next slide, please. The first part will focus on the work across the city to support more connected and stabilized communities. We have 7 bureaus joining us today to give you a sense of the interconnected work that is happening and any relevant budget-related asks. We wanted to start with some foundational grounding about the Portland's 2035 Comprehensive Plan and how that guides the work across the city and in each of our bureaus. Next, Civic Life will share more about its community involvement work. BDS will share their work to improve livability in neighborhoods. BPS will share the work we are doing to stabilize communities and improve equitable development. Prosper will show their work to create vibrant neighborhoods and businesses. PBOT will talk about their work to increase transportation choices and activating communities. Parks and green spaces are a key ingredient to the livability of our city, so we will hear from Parks. And finally, we'll hear from the Office of Community Technology about their work to expand digital access, which we know is critical for expanding access to opportunities and creating a cutting-edge city. We've integrated our presentation and plan to move from one bureau to the next. I'll try to keep watch if you have any clarifying questions along the way, but our plan was to reserve 30 minutes at the end for questions and discussions, after which we plan to give you a break. Then our second panel will focus on cleaning up the city. I'm sure you'll have many questions about that work as well, so I'd request that you hold those questions until the second panel. And now I will turn it to Principal Planner Eric Engstrom from BPS to start us off. Eric.
Thank you, Andrea. You can go to the next slide. As an introduction to this, I want to start by talking a little bit about how we define livability. In our planning work, this often boils down to how people experience their neighborhood, the places they work, they worship, and where they obtain services on a daily basis. It's helpful to think about how these places, the places that we need to be every day, are connected and how complete these places are. Next slide, please. To set the stage for that, I want to also provide a very brief primer on the city's comprehensive plan. Many people understand what zoning is, but sometimes the comprehensive plan can be a little more mysterious. The easiest way to explain this is to talk about time. Zoning is about what people are allowed to do right now if they go to a permit center. Comprehensive planning is about what we aspire to be, usually within a 20-year horizon. Next slide, please. The comprehensive plan has these parameters. Oregon requires cities to have them. They're judged in terms of consistency with statewide planning goals, and they're periodically reviewed for consistency with state and regional requirements. Next slide. Our comprehensive plan has these bits. It has a vision and guiding principles, goals and policies, a comprehensive plan map, a list of significant capital projects that are going to be related to growth, and then it also governs our transportation policies and street functions. Next slide. Portland's comp plan has this vision statement, which is that Portland is a prosperous, healthy, equitable, and resilient city where everyone has access to opportunity and is engaged in shaping decisions that affect their lives. This is how we define success, and if we're coordinating well, we should be able to see echoes of this in each bureau's work today. Next slide, please. The comprehensive plan also has diagrams like this, which help us to communicate the role different parts of the city play in that vision, and it helps us communicate how each part of the city is taking an equitable share of growth and change over time. Next slide. This strategy is built on the structure of our city today and our historic structure. As I mentioned earlier, livability is often defined by how connected and complete each part of the city is. And this diagram shows the relationship between our local neighborhood business districts in the city and how they relate economically and socially to the surrounding neighborhoods. The scale that people think about when they think about livability is often based on what's within walking distance within their local community. And in those terms, Portland can be seen as 24 communities that all share some common interests and goals. These are our main streets and surrounding neighborhoods, essentially. Next slide. When people think about places, these are the kind of ingredients that make a place livable. Portland has been a leader in developing this concept, and some of the largest cities in the world have embraced it as a way of thinking about planning and community development. So many of those elements you'll see again in today's presentation. Next slide. This map shows the areas that are yellow are places with better access to that full list of ingredients and complete services, and the areas with darker colors have poorer access. So this map obviously shows that the distribution of those things that we associate with livability is not very even throughout our city. This map and some of the data that goes behind it is how we're trying to hold ourselves accountable over a long term to measure our progress on this in more specific terms. As each bureau talks today about their role, I hope the framework I just went over can help you make sense of how this all fits together. Next slide. And at this point, I think I'm passing the baton to Civic Life.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Michael Montoya. I serve as the interim director of the Office of Community and Civic Life. I go by he, his pronouns. Next slide, please. When we think about the city, this map depicts the 95 neighborhoods. There are approximately 90 active neighborhood associations and over 50 unique neighborhood business districts. There are also 7 neighborhood districts that are color-coded here on this map. This is an initial depiction of what we think of when we think of engaging all of our city residents. Next slide, please. The city's North Star, building upon Eric's last words, is the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. Over 20 plus agency partners and thousands of residents, businesses, and nonprofits came together to develop this plan. The plan has engagement goals and policy recommendations that are the foundations of Civic Life's current and future work. Chapter 2, specifically on community involvement, has a series of goals, including community involvement as a partnership, social justice and equity, valuing community wisdom and participation, transparency and accountability, meaningful participation, accessible and effective participation, and strong civic infrastructure. Next slide, please. So Civic Life's core engagement programs can be classified in 2 ways. One, externally, that which we do outside of city government. We support all Portland residents. The Cannabis Program, Welcoming Week, the Livability Program, Community Safety, the Multnomah Youth Commission, Neighborhood Support Services, Immigrant Refugee Programs, community grants of all kinds, and a lot more. We have a picture here of 2 volunteers removing graffiti and stickers from a light post. We also have internal support programs for our partner bureaus, the Disability Program, the Mental Health Program, advisory bodies and commissions, the Portland Insights Survey, which we support, community survey, trainings, and a lot more. Our reach is diverse and our audience is complex. In addition to the 90 plus neighborhood associations, the 50 plus business districts, the neighborhood districts, there are hundreds of grantees and hundreds of more emerging civic organizations with whom we engage. There are 110 advisory boards and commissions for all of our bureaus in the city. Community Safety Program provides over 250 consultations, trainings, and events throughout the city. There are thousands that we engage with regularly through our licensing and regulation programs, and thousands more who are engaged bi-weekly in our communications infrastructure. Each of these instances of reach are moments of engagement for our city. Next slide, please. But the words engagement, participation, involvement, and belonging mean different things to different people. The truest test of an infrastructure of engagement is the quality of the relationships that it enables. What we have today is an infrastructure of engagement that amplifies and rewards critique, complaints, and campaigns of discontent, I'm sorry to say. And this diminishes community conversations and solutions-oriented connections. So in the coming months, Civic Life will announce a robust strategic planning engagement process to reimagine and realign internally and externally on how Portland's civic engagement infrastructure must look to meet the current and demographic shifts and those we anticipate for 2035 and beyond. Our work has begun by gathering good data, lessons from other cities, and the expertise of current and former engagement practitioners inside the city and out. We have a picture of someone at a welcoming week event, a child squatting next to a dog, listening to a speaker. Next slide, please. So for the last 9 months, our Bureau has kept a low profile to stabilize, heal our Bureau, and get clear on our programmatic offerings while we strengthen, assess, and realign to begin our robust strategic plan for 2035 and beyond. It's a year of stabilization because our neighborhood associations, our community-based organizations, and our neighborhood districts are the foundation of our current civic engagement infrastructure. And now is not the time to make major shifts or cuts to that framework. The time is to stabilize them so that they can participate fully in the strategic planning process for the future of engagement for our city. So we're asking to restore the cuts to our neighborhood districts, to restore the small grants for our neighborhoods, to continue the Cannabis Emergency Relief Fund, continuing the welcoming week for the Ukrainians, the Afghanis, the Haitians, and those coming from all other parts of the world into our great city, and to carry forward our contractually obligated graffiti funding, which you'll hear about more later on. Thank you. Next slide.
Good afternoon. My name is Beth Benton. I am the Property Compliance Division Manager with BDS. Next slide. People often associate the Bureau of Services with new development and new buildings. However, our neighborhood inspection program deals with existing older housing stock, dangerous and deteriorated buildings, poorly maintained apartments exposing tenants to health and safety risks, hoarding situations, nuisance conditions, and vacant homes, which are often overtaken by squatters. All of these conditions have a direct impact on neighborhood stability and livability. The main focus of the Neighborhood Inspections Program is to investigate and resolve conditions impacting public health and safety throughout our city. Our goal is compliance and ensuring that the buildings in our city are maintained and that everyone has access to safe and healthy housing. This program is also reliant on the issuance of code enforcement fees and charges for service, along with general funds to support and cover its operating costs. Code enforcement fees are designed to be a tool to motivate property owners to make required minimum repairs, and this works well for many of our cases. However, for those most vulnerable members of our community, like the elderly, disabled, low income, and those with additional hardships, these financial penalties are an additional barrier, negatively impacting their ability to comply. In extreme cases, without intervention and assistance, these financial penalties only worsen the situation, with the amounts due growing over time, potentially resulting in people losing their homes or being displaced. We need to reduce our reliance on revenue from financial penalties in order to fund our neighborhood inspections program. With ongoing general fund support, we could be a positive partner with struggling property owners versus the regulatory arm of local government. And our program will continue to support the city's goals through the reduction of blight, the repair of properties, and the preservation of housing stock, all of which contribute towards stabilizing our neighborhoods. Last but not least, an important part of the work we do includes making referrals to local agencies and nonprofits to assist property owners with needed repairs. A huge success has been our working partnership with our Empowered Neighborhoods program. I will now hand this off to Alicia Posey, who will share more information about this program. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Beth. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Leisha Posey, she, her pronouns, and I serve as the equity manager for BDS. On this slide are before and after pictures of a home that was identified as in disrepair and out of compliance, and then brought into compliance with home repair. Additionally, there are logos of some of our volunteer partners. BDS's Empowered Neighborhood Program serves homeowners and property owners from Black, Indigenous, POC, and disability communities with active compliance cases. We do this work through collaboration with homeowner, BDS staff, and skilled external volunteers such as licensed engineers and architects. In 2021, the program served 47 clients who have identified as 34% Black, 21% Asian, 19% Hispanic or Latino, 20% white. Typical projects consist of as-built work done without permits. These projects need in-depth analysis of construction, including structural assessments. Most of our clients qualify as low income and benefit from our group of volunteers who, when identified, can provide free drafting and engineering services. Our low income clients also need support to get the actual construction work done. We help connect them to free construction materials, qualified volunteer labor, and nonprofit grant funding. The program coordinator has the task of leading coordination and implementation of all parts of project planning, permitting, and identifying resources for construction to address code violations and bring them into compliance through home repair. This work can take 1 to 2 years to complete for each project due to the complexity, lack of capacity and/or resources, and overall relationship rebuilding or maintaining with our community members. The result is that we currently have homeowners on a waiting list, often living in unsafe, unhealthy living conditions or experiencing economic pressure. In addition to the project coordination, the program coordinator is actively building and maintaining partnerships with design and construction professionals and with other city programs and partners. They are also actively seeking out additional funding opportunities, such as a recent EPA awarded partnership with the Rebuilding Center. This request for funds for an additional program coordinator will impact housing stabilization and responsiveness for our historically marginalized communities the most by leveraging internal expertise and best practices while partnering with our community partners and networks who provide culturally specific outreach and engagement and skilled professional volunteers to address compliance housing cases through home repair. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you to Beth and Leisha for sharing some information about their programs. My name is Kyle O'Brien. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Budget and Finance Manager at BDS. I'm going to briefly review the budget requests related to these programs. The first request is for the BDS Empowered Neighborhoods Program, which Leisha just overviewed. This program is in extremely high demand. Currently, there is a 9-client waiting list for people who have applied in 2021, and BDS will need to hire an additional program coordinator to double capacity in the program. It will enable us to reduce the backlog of work and expand our services to reach more Portlanders. The request is for one-time general fund resources needed to fund the position for 1 year, after which BDS would be able to fund using our base resources from fees. And as Leisha mentioned, the funding will support community members and others with increased access to services and programs through culturally relevant and responsive practices and policies, resulting in greater equitable access. The second request is for the Neighborhood Inspections Program. The compliance work in the Neighborhood Inspections Program provides a direct public benefit and service to all residents, making general fund an appropriate revenue source for this work. As Beth mentioned, reliance on fines and penalties can add additional hardship and pose a barrier to compliance in many cases, especially with the elderly, disabled, low income, and people of color. The program has faced many years of resource uncertainty and has drawn down on its financial reserves. The $1.2 million Request would eliminate the draw on reserves for 1 year and reduce reliance on fines and penalties while the Bureau explores alternative revenue streams. Next slide, please. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and I'll now hand it off to Eric at BPS for the next portion of the presentation.
Thanks, Kyle. Once again, Eric Kingstrom with BPS. I use he, him pronouns. Next slide, please. I'm going to speak to several BPS activities that address who has access to livable, complete, and connected communities. Next slide, please. The Anti-Displacement Action Plan is a multi-bureau effort to clarify and document the city's policy framework, tools, and programmatic efforts, particularly what we do when we plan to make major infrastructure investments that could raise property values and economically displace people. This is being done in collaboration with with a collaborative partnership with the Community-Based Anti-Displacement Coalition. Next slide, please. This work also includes tracking where economic displacement is happening, and these slides show how the landscape has changed since 2013. On this slide, you see what was happening in 2013, where the greatest amount of economic displacement was focused in inner North and Northeast Portland. Moving forward, next slide, please, to 2020, you can see that this problem has really shifted to East Portland and is one of the dominant issues facing that part of the city today. Next slide, please. This talks about our spatial justice planning practice. This is a branch of our planning work that we have launched in the past year. It responds to our 2019 Historical Context of Racist Planning report. In that report, we acknowledge that the roots of zoning have some pretty explicit connections to racist and segregationist intent historically. The Spatial Justice Program is about unwinding that history and working with community to dismantle elements of our zoning tools that are still causing harm. For example, this coming year, one of the things we're going to take on is looking at our home-based business regulations. This set of regulations was cited in the People's Plan as something that potentially disproportionately impacts entrepreneurs of color. And so we're going to take a look at that and potentially rethink those rules. Next slide, please. Through our district planning program, we have several staff focused on community development and general constituent problem solving in East Portland. The highlight this past year was a summit meeting we hosted with help from Unite Oregon and the East Portland Action Plan. It's been 12 years since the city and community partners completed that East Portland Action Plan, and it's time to talk about where we go from here and how that's working and what our next steps are. We also facilitate a monthly meeting with engagement and planning staff from various agencies to coordinate our work and our communication concerning East Portland. One other highlight I want to mention is in 2021, we partnered with the Historic Park Rose NPN organization to develop a new community plan for Park Rose with support from an ODOT grant. This plan addresses Sandy Boulevard safety and has recommendations for livability, prosperity, and resiliency in the Historic Park Rose Commercial District. We also are providing technical support to Prosper Portland as they look at the future of tax increment financing in East Portland with community. Urban renewal district adoption is considered a land use decision under state law, and so our work there and their work will eventually go through a recommendation from the Planning and Sustainability Commission, and we have to document conformance with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan and state land use policies. Next slide, please. In West Portland, our work is focused on the West Portland Town Center, which is some demographics similar to East Portland in the area around where Barber Boulevard and Capitol Highway meet near PCC Sylvania. We're working with the Southwest Equity Coalition to expanding housing choice in this part of the city and implement a Metro 2040 Town Center. And this plan will reach council in late 2022. So livability is also about who has access to it, and that's what this plan is about. Next slide, please. You all are probably starting to get familiar with the residential infill project. We are completing phase 2 of that work, which is before council right now. It completes our effort to comply with House Bill 2001, furthering broader housing choice and capacity. Once again, helping to give more access to existing high opportunity neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to just call out a priority decision package in the BPS budget, which is a request to fund a new cycle of regulatory improvement, also known as RECAP, to overhaul our land division code, as well as provide a general mechanism to make a variety of zoning code improvements. With COVID, many small businesses have had to rethink how they work, and the economic disruption has had widespread effects. This is a moment when we need additional capacity to be more nimble with our zoning code. As the new normal becomes clear, we may need to adjust how our regulations respond to that new reality. And we think having a package move forward at this time around regulatory improvement can help us in the recovery. Streamlining our land division code is also a logical step to take after the residential infill project to further expedite housing development. Thank you from BPS. And from here, I'm passing the baton to Prosper Portland at the next slide, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Abwaf. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Development and Investment with Prosper Portland. Glad to be here today to talk a little bit about the important role that small businesses and economic development plays in the city's work to create livable neighborhoods. And while Council will hear more about our work citywide with small businesses, industry, and workforce at the end of March, I'm happy to be here today to share more about our place-based work, our investments, and budget priorities. As was mentioned earlier, small local businesses really are the anchors to our neighborhoods and how many of us identify and relate to the places that we live. Prosper has 3 funding priorities that I'll speak to today, focused on supporting small businesses. And these tie closely with many of the priorities you're hearing about from other Bureau partners like PBOT, Parks, BDS, and Planning and Sustainability. Our 3 funding priorities across multiple budget sources like tax increment financing, general fund, and ARPA include: first, creating vibrant, economically healthy, and inclusive neighborhoods as the ecosystem in which our small businesses can start and grow. Second, we'll get there.
Okay.
Stabilizing small businesses within community and strengthening impacted business districts. As this slide shows, we are showing a set of data metrics of what our businesses and our business districts are experiencing. Our agency's programs and investments are implemented in direct partnership with small businesses and community nonprofits. As a reflection of that, our programs and investments really are informed by and have to pivot to and respond to what our community is experiencing in real time. Over the past 2 years, this has been true more than ever, given the impact of COVID and its ongoing wake to small businesses and our business community. As I mentioned, this slide shows percentages and numbers reflecting current trends that our businesses and business districts are experiencing. Small businesses, particularly retailers, were faced with an immediate threat of closure, and many have had to close or to start again. Commercial corridors and business districts are facing increased vacancy rates, ongoing break-ins, increased competition from online retailers, and depleted savings and increased costs. At the same time as they face a workforce shortage and challenges in hiring and finding staff. Given these realities, the types of interventions we've heard are necessary and immediately needed include resources to find new space, filling in vacancy holes and creating opportunities for diverse businesses, marketing and activations to bring community together and drive foot traffic to commercial areas, and investing longer term in inclusive and mixed income and mixed use neighborhoods. Next slide, please. First, I'm going to touch on some of Prosper's most significant place-based resources and how we invest them through tax increment financing within TIF districts. These are largely allocated according to community-guided priorities and action plans, and we'll be returning to Council to discuss these TIF budgets in further detail in early May. In Old Town, North-Northeast, Gateway, and Lentz, our community-guided priorities are defined by 5-year action plans that are then supported using grants, loans, and property sales to support wealth creation for BIPOC-owned and legacy businesses, as well as property owners, to create jobs, to stabilize small businesses and anchor nonprofits, and to create healthy mixed income districts. This slide shows photos of a couple of the projects and partners who have benefited from these types of investments. Through TIF, or tax increment financing investment. In Lents, we've been able to support Hacienda CDC's, the Portland Mercado, an incubator for businesses to launch and grow, as well as a hub for Latino culture, as well as the Asian Health Services Center, who provides mental health and community and public health services with a focus on Portland's Asian communities. In Northeast, we've provided loans and grants to over 50 businesses and property owners, with more than 50% awarded to Black, African American, and African-owned businesses to improve or to move into new space. In Old Town, we've partnered with longtime culturally specific museums like the Japanese American Museum of Oregon and the Portland Chinatown Museum to allow them to move from leasing their space and being at risk of displacement to owning their space. In Gateway, we've invested in stabilizing small businesses during PBOT's transportation improvements along Halsey and Wadler, and we've co-invested with the Portland Housing Bureau early to provide affordable and mixed income housing, as well as affordable commercial space at the new Nick Fish. All of these are in line with the community defined action plans and in partnership with both private and nonprofit organizations. And through this construction work, our equity requirements apply to all private and nonprofit partners, regardless of the level of public investment. We've been able to leverage $215 million of construction funding, with $47 million of that awarded to minority, disadvantaged, and women-owned firms. Next slide, please. Second, I wanted to touch a little bit on the small business work that we do. A portion of our general fund and TIF budgets offer specific investment programs focused on helping to stabilize small businesses within community, which you'll hear a bit more about at our presentation on March 31st. Through programs like our affordable commercial tenanting pilots, we've provided direct leasing opportunities at affordable commercial space in 4 key pilots, one at 10th and Yamhill Garage, at Lents Commons at 92nd and Foster, at the Nick Fish at 106 and Halsey, and at Alberta Commons. What you see to the left is a picture of one of our tenants, Amity Artisan Goods, at the 10th and Yamhill Garage. To date, this program has created opportunities for 7 BIPOC and women-owned businesses in space, and we have the ability to house an additional 10 businesses, all while activating commercial districts with locally owned businesses and providing the needed goods and services within community. Another of our most popular programs within TIF districts is our Small Business Prosperity Grant, which serves 50 to 60 businesses annually and serves grants of $50,000 to $75,000 for larger tenancy improvements to their space. Over 60% of these grant resources have gone to BIPOC-owned businesses annually. And the picture that you see to the right on this slide is Ladybug Academy, a childcare provider, which is one of our clients. Through the pandemic, we've received 2 rounds of general fund funding to also support a new program that we launched that helps us respond to businesses' new and growing needs around repair and security. This program offers grants of up to $10,000 per business for immediate repair needs like broken windows, smashed in door frames, property damage, and security costs. To date, we've allocated resources to 184 businesses, approximately 50% of which self-identify as BIPOC owned. And we actually have a wait list of 45 businesses, and so would welcome additional resources to help support our business community. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of pop-up work and addressing immediate needs around vacancies that we're doing. Responding to the lack of foot traffic within various business districts and the impact of staying at home has had on our business community, Prosper is making an ARPA request for $4.5 million over a 2-year period. This request supports 3 major areas of work. First and foremost, these resources would provide tenant readiness support to businesses who are looking to expand, relocate, or move into vacant retail spaces for the first time. The small business support would occur via direct tenanting grants to approximately 50 businesses, together with technical assistance focused on retail advising. A second effort would be around activations. And on the activation side, we would partner with Venture Portland, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and individual business districts. And a portion of the funds would support approximately 6 additional community-led activations. This builds on our work over the past year, which has included many partners and direct funding to business districts, as well as direct programming by Prosper Portland. Last summer, we helped coordinate programming at 2 important downtown plazas, one on the North Park blocks and one at Tillicum Plaza, which featured community-inspired street murals by Black, Indigenous, and Latinx artists, appealed to a range of communities, brought people back to the central city, and encouraged visitors to discover and shop at nearby legacy and BIPOC-owned businesses. Community partners led 42 events, and we hosted an additional 15 events with over 73 days of programming over the summer months. On average, the plazas had 20 people using the space at any given time, and My People's Market was one of the largest hosted events on the North Parks Plaza, recording more than 8,000 people in attendance over 3 days. And finally, the last component of this ask would be a strong social media presence focused on amplifying small local businesses and events through platforms like Shop Small PDX that lists and promotes over 1,600 of our local small businesses. And with that, I'd like to transition it over to PBOT, who's been a really close partner with us in some of this work.
Thank you, Lisa. My name is Art Pierce. I'm the Director of Policy, Planning, and Projects at the Portland Bureau of Transportation. I use he, him pronouns. Next slide. Really pleased to speak with you today amongst the myriad of services that PBOT has provided around the crucial role that right-of-way activation and plazas have played over the past couple of years. These have been a crucial move as we have seen the need for space all the more critical, and particularly outside space, all the more critical, and really have seen an outpouring of a variety of improvements that really have helped with economic recovery and community resilience in the last really challenging couple of years. Next slide. It's also important to note that this is really significant to our transportation system. Place creation sets the tone for someone's travel behavior. We found that it is absolutely deeply connected with our goal of cycling, walking, and transit. And even have found that through surveys, 75 to nearly 90% of visitors to these spaces walked, biked, or took transit, which is more significant than really any other enterprise that we've ever seen. Next slide. It's also really important, the realization that we're having that public space is a key part of a complete community. In these growing areas where we have zoned more dense development to occur, we do not have adequate public space for the community commons to connect together, but we do have a public right-of-way that could be converted to provide that function. And really a realization that there is a set of living rooms such as Pioneer Square that we need to now think about how to transfer that same thought process and careful provision out to the many neighborhoods of Portland, so everyone can have multiple living rooms to choose from at a given moment. Next slide, please. One of the areas that we did have to pause for a little while, but really are bringing back with gusto, is our community events permitting process. So we had over 200 permits in 2019 with 1 million plus Portlanders visiting that, really bringing forward support for small business industry, the supply vendors, and that whole group. And for 2022, this program is back up and running, and we have a new online permit application and a very affordable fee. And so we are very excited to work with that. Also a deep collaboration with the Events Action Table and those grants, really making sure that we are offering public plazas and public right-of-way as a choice venue for these events. Next slide. The Healthy Block Program, or the Block Party Program, which was paused during 2020, came back in 2021 with over 600 block parties held. PBOT has continued to work to reduce barriers, including providing the traffic control devices, as well as collaborating with community to do community-led painting projects. Next slide. Also of great excitement has been the Healthy Business Program. This is probably what we've seen the biggest shift over the last couple of years, with over 1,000 permits issued to individual small businesses, as well as 50 permits issued to multiple businesses working together to create full street plazas. This has been, I think probably one of the more transformative moves that we've seen in Portland over the last couple of years. And really excited to report that over 20% of this has been with BIPOC organizations, and we've been able to help reduce the impact on and cost impact for those with traffic control devices and other supplies. Over 94% of respondents have said they want to see this program continue, which is really a remarkable stat. Next slide. As we just had a press conference with Commissioner Hardesty on Monday announcing that our intention to make both the Healthy Business and the Plaza program permanent with an extension of the current permit cycle through September 1st, giving time for us to determine the funding for that program through this current budget deliberation process. But we are moving this program from something that is a pandemic emergency response to a more permanent, sustainable program that will involve some fees being introduced, and that level really depends on how much subsidy we're able to get from council funding. And then great continued collaboration with Prosper Portland and their adjacent tenants to really make these spaces thrive. So we're very excited. Also bringing additional inspection and compliance in, so making sure that all of these sites are safe and welcoming to passing pedestrians as well. Next slide. Another exciting initiative over the last couple of years has been PBOT leaning into the creation of public street plazas. So this is an illustration of sort of an uncurated plaza where there's an individual business who's using street space for their specific business use. Next slide. And the realization that with some broader curation in partnership with adjacent businesses, as well as with community groups and other cultural organizations, there's the potential to really make a place out of these street spaces. So PBOT is working to bring those amenities in terms of painting of the street, wayfinding, welcoming signage, planters as traffic barriers, and then the community activation both directly for that site as well as in collaboration with the Events Action Table and with Prosper. Next slide. We have some great examples. So these are images of some of the examples that we're really proud of. I think one that we've talked about in the past is the Dream Street Plaza that is adjacent to a Prosper development. And so we've seen a lot of collaboration with them there. But then Rainbow Road on Ankeny, great activation with both business use and public use on Montavilla that had a whole number of events happening. Afro Village on Northwest Davis. Next slide. The cart blocks in Southwest Park, you might notice a special painter in that image. Really appreciate the help. Pride Plaza, that has been a really great cultural and welcoming space. And then on the art blocks on Northwest 13th and then Wilder on Northeast 30th are just a handful of examples of the types of spaces that we've been able to create, really reimagining our street space. Next slide. And the great thing is this seems to fit really well with what Portlanders want and where we are as a city. In terms of did plazas and businesses operating outdoor create a safe environment space, 89% said yes. Looking beyond 2021, should street space remain open to the public? 94% said yes. This is something Portlanders want, and this is something that we can do and continue. Next slide. As with the other presenters, important to highlight for council how crucial their budget decisions, particularly around the ARPA distributions for 2022 to 25, are to the continuation of this program. The Healthy Business and Community Use Permit Program has been free for the last couple of years. While we will be adding some fees back in, it cannot continue at this level without some council investment in it. And similarly, for the vibrant and inclusive community spaces, the Plaza program, we need council's support to continue to help the Bureau lean into this really great endeavor and really press in collaboration with adjacent businesses and communities how to make this a long-term sustainable part of all of Portland's neighborhoods. Next slide. I'd like to now pass on to Parks.
Thanks, Art. My name is Lauren McGuire, she, her. I'm the Asset and Development Division Manager for Portland Parks and Recreation. Portland Parks and Recreation is working very hard to help create healthy, connected communities with livable, vibrant neighborhoods with improved access to parks and green spaces, ADA accessibility for all, neighborhood programs and connections and park improvements. Next slide, please. So what is Portland Parks and Recreation already doing to help this? First, we start by focusing our management decisions on equity. We have made progress in helping to make a more equitable city despite funding challenges. We continue to hear that that Portlanders want and they value walkability and increased access to parks. The Bureau has a goal for everyone to live within a half a mile of a park or a natural area. Right now, 1 in 5 Portlanders do not have access to a park within a half a mile. And in East Portland, it's 2 in 5 households that do not have access to a park within a half mile. But we have made progress. Within the last 5 years, we've built or are in the process of building 20 new major parks or significant park additions, many of which are in historically underserved areas in East Portland. These park and natural area improvements were funded using our park system development charges and our bond funding. The sources of funding have provided park opportunities for many households that did not have it before, in particular, as I noted, in East Portland. We also are constantly renovating our parks and our natural areas to remove unsafe, outdated, broken, vandalized assets like playgrounds and benches and restrooms and trails and bridges and facilities using our general fund money, thank you, and implementation of the $68 million 2014 Parks Replacement Bond. Portland Parks and Recreation is now preparing for implementation of the $31.8 million Metro Bond Local Share Program as well, which will provide additional new opportunities for park development for fixing our parks and increasing access to nature. In conjunction with this, we're enhancing access to nature and parks with new multimodal trails and natural area trails, new pathways, and new bridges. Another area that we're aggressively working on is addressing ADA barriers to improve accessibility for all with the establishment of our ADA program in the last couple of years. The additional ADA financial support from the general fund has been very, very helpful. So thank you, Council, for that. As we're doing our work, we're connecting with the community, particularly those populations not engaged within the past. Through our extensive community engagement work, these interactions have helped us to tailor our park designs and implement desired improvements to our parks and our open spaces. We're also continuing to provide programming and events to the public, like Summer Free for All, to bring the community together. With COVID, recreation has had to reinvent itself many ways, but particularly creating more virtual classes and programs. Another area that we're working on is job creation through the direct staff hires with our levy funding. Thanks to levy funding, we've been able to hire almost 100 new full-time people and numerous seasonal staff. This helps us support the community with living wage jobs. And as we're doing that, we're taking our workforce and helping to diversify it so that it's more reflective of the Portland community. We're also trying to prioritize COVID consultant and contracting job opportunities for the disadvantaged minorities, women, emerging small businesses, and service-disabled veterans in our capital project public contracting. We're pretty proud that we have achieved almost double the city's utilization goals in that area. We're also actively working on the development of job training opportunities with staff apprenticeships, particularly technical maintenance services jobs like facility maintenance technicians and the future electricians, carpenters, and others. Also, over the past 20 years, as our fees for classes and swim lessons and other recreation programs have grown, PP&R is now reducing cost barriers to people who cannot afford our recreation programs by establishing a pay what you can program. This is going to help the community health and well-being and is made possible through our voter-approved levy funding. Next slide, please. Through the years, past councils and park directors and voters have translated these core park and recreation values into a nationally recognized PP&R system. Voters came through again with our operational levy. And so this budget year, here's what we hope to do with our levy funding. We would like to provide increased programming by, as I noted earlier, reducing the cost as a barrier with $6.8 million in one-time levy funding allocations to reduce our reliance on earned revenue, allowing for new access models and pandemic resiliency. We'd like to restore Multnomah Arts Center funding with $905,000 one-time levy funding to bring MAC in line with our funding models and other recreational services. And we'd like to provide summer free for all with a $62,000 allocation in fiscal year 22-23, and then follow that with a $290,000 fiscal year allocation in 23-24 to eliminate our reliance on fundraising. we're fortunate to have the levy funding and to be supported by more than 3,300 dedicated full-time and part-time employees, thousands of volunteers, our Parks Board, more than 200 friends and partner groups, and our philanthropic partner, the Portland Parks Foundation. We'd like to continue to help those partnerships grow. And this translates to a facilitation with $475,000 of one-time levy funding to a community partnership program to expand PP&R's capacity to reach underserved communities and center equity. Next slide, please. Our community believes, and PP&R concurs, that we must take care of our park system that we have. When we surveyed the community, 9 out of 10 respondents feel that maintaining our parks, natural areas, and facilities is critically important. Right now, 42% of our assets are in poor or very poor condition. We're not where we want to be as far as maintaining a sustainable and equitable system. PP&R has to make hard decisions every year about what our park system should look like, what we should fund, and what we should close. Here's where Portland Parks and Recreation would like to go to support a more connected, vibrant, and livable community with capital set aside and general fund asks. We have 3. We are requesting that council approve the support and delivery of asset maintenance for an ask with Pier Park whole park ADA improvements of $5 million in capital set aside. That will help us to remove 120 barriers for that particular park. We receive a bit over $1 million for our ADA program, and yet we should have at least $5.8 million per year in order to remediate all 17,008 identified ADA barriers by the year 2036, which is what our transition plan asked us to do. We're also asking for $2.5 million in capital set aside through our energy savings performance contract phase 2. This will help us do a variety of upgrades to electrical and mechanical systems, as well as pathway lighting, which would help us achieve cost saving and operational efficiencies with LED lighting, which is dark sky and bird friendly. We also are asking for our $500,000 of additional ongoing general fund ask for major maintenance via the budget note that council asked us to request each year. This $500,000 additional funding would increase the total annual major maintenance allocation to $5.1 million. Even that number is still significantly short of other park systems of our size and only scratches the surface on what we begin to need to address our $500 million backlog of maintenance issues. Next slide, please. Our final ask of council is to address livability in the city through the allocation of American Rescue Plan funding allocations. One is $10 million for Mount Scott Community Center roof to address unanticipated roof failure deficiencies, and also to redirect and then backfill Build Portland funding for the restoration of O'Brien Square. Mount Scott Community Center functions as a resiliency center for those in need in times of extreme weather events and emergencies. So in summary, PP&R asks that council consider our thoughtful, measured budget requests. We have taken and will continue to take seriously our metrics on how we're doing. This will be an ongoing process of metric evaluation and changes as we continue to work towards a park system that meets our desired service levels and equity goals. Thank you. I'll pass it on to Elizabeth Perez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. My name is Elizabeth Perez. I am the director for the Office for Community Technology. So recently, my staff and I have been attending the results-based accountability training, and the one question we're meant to ask is how we would like to see Portlanders in the future. So we'd be finishing the phrase, all Portlanders are. As seen in this slide, the 2035 Comprehensive Plan lists goals and policies regarding communication and technology services, particularly to ensure that there is access to universal, affordable, and state-of-the-art services with an effort to reduce disparities. However, the Portland Plan's complete neighborhood definition doesn't include access to technology. Yet we know that the affordable internet and devices, including phones, are essential for people to access public safety and engage civically, along with access to education, employment, healthcare, among other daily needs. We have seen through the pandemic that internet and communications technology is essential and has accelerated the transition to services online. This isn't just about the internet. It's about creating an environment for Portlanders to thrive. So I would like to go back to the RBA training assignment and tie this back to the vision for the 2035 comp plan. Portland is a prosperous, healthy, equitable, and resilient city where everyone has access, an opportunity, and is engaged in shaping decisions that affect their lives. We can't do this without digital equity. Next slide, please. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to walk you through the lives of two fictional people based on the insights we've received from community to illustrate the greater divide we are now in and will only increase in the future. So we've got a fictional Sarah and Maya. They're both in their 20s, have full-time jobs, and are in school at night part-time. Sarah has a computer and a smartphone. She's able to pay the $50 for internet service and $75 for unlimited data every month. Maya can't afford internet at home and has a limited cell data plan of $20 a month. Both have jobs that allow for hybrid work, but because Maya doesn't have internet at home, she commutes to work every day. Maya therefore spends more money on bus fare and more time commuting. Both have the ability to do online healthcare as well. Sarah is able to do her mental health appointments at home during the workday on her breaks, while Maya doesn't feel comfortable doing her online physical therapy at work online. She has to go into the medical office, but oftentimes skips it because she just doesn't have the time. They both attend early evening classes downtown, but after class, Sarah gets to finish up her homework in the comfort of her own home, while Maya stays late at the library. And then finally, both shop at Fred Meyer, and this is something we've been hearing about. Sarah gets the extra savings for using her digital coupons on her phone. Maya does so as well, but she has to ration her data plan. So sometimes at the end of the month when she could really use them, and anyone who's ever lived paycheck to paycheck can understand, she's out of data. So now the difference between Sarah and Maya might seem small, but the impacts to their physical, mental health, education, monthly budget, and free time accumulates. These are impacts to their economic prosperity in the long term. And we're just talking about two single women in their 20s. The impacts to families is exponential. Next slide, please. So how can we achieve the vision of the 2035 comp plan to ensure residents like Sarah and Maya and the thousands of other community members can thrive in Portland? We currently have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to greatly improve a sustainable technology future for our city. Oregon is estimated to receive $200 million in federal dollars to invest in building services across our state. This includes the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, also known as BEAD, in addition to ARPA funding. This is why we are working with Commissioner Rubio and the Office of Government Relations to ensure that the State Broadband Office and other decision makers are aware of the unique digital access barrier our urban community members experience. We have a digital equity roundtable scheduled with regional partners to talk through the issues our community is facing and identify connectivity needs that should be addressed and prioritized by the influx of federal and state funding, and share how these ideas might kickstart this shared sustainable technology future. The federal funds do require a 25% match that the city would need to be prepared for. So I hope you share the same optimism I do for what this funding can do to improve our outcomes for our most marginalized communities. And I look forward to working with our community and really our fellow bureaus to create shovel-ready and comprehensive projects and strategies in effort to direct those federal funds to meet the needs of our priority communities. Next slide, please. So just to bring it back, the comp plan's vision is for Portland to be a prosperous, healthy, equitable, and resilient city where everyone has access to opportunity and is engaged in shaping decisions that affect their lives. Building out fiber infrastructure will help our economy grow, attract new business, and provide the necessary backbone infrastructure needed to support affordable, universal internet service for all. That is all I have for today. I believe we're taking questions.
Thank you very much, Director Perez. So that concludes our coordinated presentation. Mayor, commissioners, and budget advisors, we now have time for your questions and any discussions you'd like to have.
I can get us started, and then I'm sure my colleagues can jump in, and I'll probably ask a couple of questions and then come back and ask some more. Can we start with the cannabis program and the Cannabis Emergency Relief Fund? Is there a slide on that? Hi, Michael.
Hello. No, there is not a slide on that. That will be presented on March 31st as part of the Economic Resilience and Recovery presentation.
Okay.
I may be able to answer some questions on it today, but that would be the best time for those questions.
Why don't I just save that question for a different date then? How about, why don't we go to BPS and the anti-displacement? Eric, I think that's you. BPS and your anti-displacement plans and work, if I may. Very important work. I'll tell you, especially if you go back to the time before COVID, this was, I think, one of the top priorities for Portlanders. I've been really excited to see what ideas come out of this project. Can you give us, and I also noticed, at least in the documents I'm looking at today, I don't see a specific budget ask for the anti-displacement work. So I was just wondering where we are with that work and what can we expect over the next 12 months or 18 months?
Sure, I guess I can start, and Andrea, if you have anything, feel free to jump in. Yeah, with COVID, we've been working on this project collaboratively with community organizations, and obviously COVID and the situation has affected all of those community partners' ability to really be engaged at a fast pace. So we have slowed down that a little bit because of at the request of our community partners.
Okay.
We continue to be working internally on developing those protocols and essentially policies, particularly around, as I mentioned, what our operating procedure is collectively as a group of bureaus when we're making a major investment, like what's happening on 82nd Avenue, for example, and what are the specific frameworks that we want to take in terms of acting in concert with that major investment to help reduce displacement. So that has to do with what our approach is to those to other community development investments that happen at the same time. And I'll make a plug there. There are some, although BPS is not making an ask on that, there is a Prosper and housing ask related to that is related to 82nd Avenue specifically. We have internalized that program to our ongoing budget, so we're not making a one-time ask with that this year. But what you can expect from that program is more specific operating protocols for the bureaus that are making major investments that could affect property values and cause economic displacement. And you can expect in the next year that those community partnerships will be more robust and re-engaging as we come out of COVID.
So over the next year, we'll get the conversation going, but we're probably not going to have a plan or anything. Is that kind of?
We will have a set of best practices and policies clearly spelled out. But again, a lot of where the action is on this topic is really those housing and economic development investments that are more on a project specific basis. So, and there will be action on that as well.
And I think if I'm reading Director Durbin's body language, did you want to jump in here, Director?
Yeah, I would just add, so the other aspect of this is we're updating the vulnerability maps and with new data, so we can really kind of pinpoint the areas where we need to really focus more attention to stabilization activities. And this framework that we've been developing in cooperation with other bureaus will give us more kind of precise clarity around actions that we need to take to stabilize. And I think the 82nd Avenue project, I think, is a good first approach where we're going to be applying this new framework. And I am, and it's going to raise questions about how the actions that'll help to, build more stability and bond communities are going to kind of identify, what the resource needs are there. So we'll have an opportunity to present those to council. I think we've made good progress in developing this new framework and kind of making it more applicable and applied so that we can bring it to council, and we'll have that more presentations, more information for council. Meanwhile, we'll work with community to help bring community along to engage in the work as well.
Okay, thank you. Here, why don't I lower my hand and I'll get back in the queue so my colleagues can speak for a little bit.
I think Commissioner Ryan was next.
Hello, happy St. Patrick's Day. I did notice Show DeZono has quite the green outfit going on there. Hello, Show, good to see you. I want to actually start off with, where did she go? Hi, Lisa from Prosper Portland, how are you? You had that slide that revealed some information that is affirming in terms of what you hear out there on the streets. But I haven't seen a slide that captured it quite like that before in terms of the data that you presented, right? The 12%, let's say 25% of business district increase in reported crime, 25%, well, almost 26% less small businesses over the past year. And then getting to a pretty scary rate of office vacancy rates. It's at 22%. I might have missed something. Those are the ones that I jotted down. Do you think that your budget request, so that you kind of presented the problem, correct? And the challenges. And so do you think the investments that you're seeking get to the heart of the matter to provide aspirin for these headaches that our small businesses are currently dealing with? I couldn't tell, to be honest with you.
Yeah, maybe I'll touch on one at a time, and there's more to come also on March 1st.
Sure.
So definitely the repair grant is a direct response to what we've heard from small businesses as immediate need, and we see ongoing needed resources to support that program. So that's, and you'll see that both in what we've asked for in the past and what we ask for going forward. Both the activations, and you'll see there's a larger ARPA ask that we'll share more about on March 31st. That really focuses on stabilizing businesses in their space. So the larger ask is around evictions prevention, because a lot of businesses continue to have to be in negotiation with their landlords or are owing past due rent and facing increasing operating costs, largely often tied to security and insurance. So we're asking for a pretty large $10 million ask that would go out directly to businesses as grants to support them in their operating costs. On the activation side, we're
really, because the liability insurance is going up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And then the majority of our activation ask is actually focused more on how do we activate vacant commercial spaces on the ground floor, because one of the challenges is we have a high level of vacancy, particularly for small retailers. The good news is I think we are seeing in particular districts an increased interest by businesses who want to continue to start and to grow. And so the resources that we're asking for complement what PBOT's asking for. Ours is largely focused on tenanting vacant retail spaces on the private side of the shop. The money would go directly to businesses. It is not intended as a resource to go to landlords.
What's it like to access these funds? What's the journey like for a business that has had their windows broken, 3 times in the last month?
It's a good, maybe I'll walk through. We really streamlined our repair grant. So pretty much a business reaches out to us, they submit an application, and what they have to do is submit an invoice and a demonstration of, early on, we were asking just for photos of what the impact to the business was. And then we turn around and based on either the estimate or their payment out for the repair that they've had to do, we pay them directly. So it's really short turnaround. I mean, as long as the scope's pretty tiny, and most of these scopes are pretty tiny, they're getting paid within a couple of weeks to a month.
And so when they call our offices, we have them call you, Lisa. I mean, it's not 311, it's not 9. What's that look like?
Yeah, maybe I can put the link to the program. I'll put the link in the comments. The one caveat is we are putting businesses over to a wait list because we're actually oversubscribed at this time. So I want to manage expectations, which is we'll continue to manage a wait list. We'll continue to take folks onto that list, we do have very limited resources that we're putting out right now. And if anything's left over and businesses don't end up using it, we'll roll into the wait list and take kind of first come, first serve. And it's one of the things that we're in conversations with the mayor's office about if there's additional funds this fiscal year, actually, because we have 45 businesses on the wait list, and that list continues to grow on a daily basis.
Okay. And this is just my way of not, I was having fun with you, but it's just what you hear about consistently when you're out there. So none of the data was surprising at all. And sadly, I don't think it's really improved much in the last few months. In fact, some would say it's gotten worse. So I want to make sure that as a city council, we're supportive of this response at this time. And so that's what I was getting to the heart of the matter about. One, if your ask is relevant to what the need is, I couldn't tell, maybe we'll have further dialogue. And then two, if in fact it's a nimble system for people to access. So thank you so much for answering these questions, and also for you and Kimberly providing leadership to be responsive to our small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Hardesty, you're next.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated the entire conversation. I have a couple of really specific questions. So, I went back to the 20-minute neighborhoods, and I think that's something that we keep forgetting to look back at, because it's clear that most, at least let me just say from where I live, or if you live on the other side of 82nd, a 20-minute neighborhood is still an aspiration. And so I know that we're trying to do multiple things. We're trying to start a recovery process from COVID. We're also trying to imagine what the city of Portland will be like and for who when we are on the path to recovery. When I think about the small businesses, I know for residential, rents went up 30% in the last 2 years. I hear from small businesses every day that they are 1 or 2 months away from being priced out. I don't know if a commercial property went up as significantly as residential did, but this is an issue that we don't actually talk about, right? Also, I think that most people who've had the privilege to work from home over the last 2 years are now considering a hybrid model. So many of the Class A office space that people were used to, people having 10,000, 20,000 square feet, that is a relic of the past. And I've heard no conversations about how the business community is adapting to this new normal and how they are trying to be helpful with small businesses. And again, 20 employees and less, which is really the backbone of Oregon. And I'm terrified that these small businesses, the ones that don't really have a voice in this chamber, are the ones that no longer will be able to operate. So I'm not hearing anything about the partnership. I just hear about us investing dollars in places that we think are going to do something different. And so I just wanted to make that overall concern. I will say I'm concerned that Parks doesn't have a fundraising plan. Because we may remember the levy was about giving you the time to create a fundraising plan. And I heard in the presentation that it was going to be free, and somebody was happy that they wouldn't have to be doing fundraising. So that caught my attention, because I think this council will expect Parks to come back in the next couple of years with a plan that's actually going to stabilize Parks long-term. And so when I heard that made me really, really, really nervous. I have one more thing I want to talk about. Now, I don't know if people are aware, but displacement is happening as we speak. And so I know that we have had a anti-displacement committee, but I didn't hear anything about the coalition today about whether they are still meeting. Are they resourced? Because I know I want to do 82nd Avenue different than we've done other projects. And I want one table and not a whole bunch of tables with people at counter purposes. And so I've heard nothing about where that is at this moment. I know we took a pause because of COVID and how overextended these community-based organizations were. And so I just would need to know where that is and how we resource them so that they can start working now because I don't know what we're waiting for. Displacement is happening as we speak. So thank you.
Commissioner, I could just mention that we are resourcing the coalition right now and using current year's budget. So we don't have a new ask, but we have resources that are going towards them for their meeting and operations. And I might ask if PBOT has any comment on the framework that's being set up for 82nd Avenue is a key part of that dialogue.
Yeah, sure. We just had actually a really great conversation yesterday at the Planning and Development Directors, where we walked both about overall approach to displacement and then specifically to 82nd, the strategy that's coming together really in deep partnership with Prosper and Housing Bureau and community groups. So I'm very encouraged by it. I think Commissioner Hardesty, we should do a follow-up briefing with you to walk you through all of those details. I think we have maybe among the most complete picture we've ever had about what our approach is and how we will follow through on those. So I'm really encouraged by where we are as a grouping of bureaus to show a one city response.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I have one more question, which was really around the East Portland TIF districts. I know that, again, it's in this document. It says staff supports the East Portland TIF districts. And we don't know what the TIF districts are going to look like yet. So I'm a little nervous to have a budget document that says that there's support for something that has not been clearly articulated, at least not to me, maybe to others.
What we meant by that, Commissioner, is that we're providing technical support to Prosper as they have that community dialogue. It's not to indicate support or opposition. It was simply to say we're providing technical support related to land use policies.
And I want to make sure we give Parks a chance to respond to your other question. I don't know who from Parks. Are you the one?
Claudio Camposano will respond to it, but Commissioner Hardesty, we do actually have a whole sustainable future effort in place to sustain our future funding. Claudio, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, no, Lauren, that's absolutely right. Claudio Camposano, him, finance, property, and technology manager for Parks. So I think just to clarify what the request is that we've got, it's really just several $100,000 so that we don't need to raise money for summer free for all. That's been a program that we've done sort of individual donations for over the last several many years, and it's a very heavy lift and creates a lot of instability in that program. So and also creates access issues. So the goal there is to eliminate barriers to participating in that, and that's really our free lunch and play and events in the parks in the summertime. But as Lauren mentioned, we've stood up the Sustainable Future program, which is really an effort to develop a long-term resource plan for parks, and that's well underway. Looking at successor resources for local option levy, as well as capital resources. So we're absolutely on top of that. I just wanted to clarify that.
I'm very happy to hear that. That just stuck out to me, that statement about happy not to be fundraising. It's like, yeah, okay, thank you. Now I know, thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Maps.
Jeff, did you want to get in on what we're just talking about, or do you have a new topic? Okay, great. I just have a couple of quick PBOT questions, if I may. Let's see, probably two or three of them. First, with the Healthy Business Program, I think the last time I saw this proposal, the ARPA ask there was one for $5.1 million, and today it's today I think it's $6 million. Has something changed? Has the scope of the project changed, or do we know what's going on there?
I'm not familiar with what that change might be. The number I saw when it got submitted to the budget was that amount. But I can certainly follow up with staff to find out what that difference might be.
Okay, thanks, Art. I'd just be curious if it's not too much of a hassle. And another PBOT question. When PBOT thinks about livability, do you think about sort of street maintenance as being part of livability, or is that kind of outside the scope of?
I believe it is, and I think there's another PBOT colleague for the second seating of this livability session is talking more about the cleanup efforts, and so I think that that's kind of where that part of PBOT will be coming into this conversation.
Okay, just to give whoever comes in for that presentation a heads up, I'd just be interested in how PBOT is doing on just basic maintenance for things like paving roads, street sweeping. Certainly when I'm sure all of our offices here get a lot of feedback from the public about livability. One of the top issues is sort of like trash, just the general condition of the city, including the conditions of our streets. And those colleagues are the questions I wanted to get to.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mapps. Director Selby.
Thank you. This question or comment really is for Director Montoya. In regards to your strategic plan for civic life, that is really exciting to hear that you're going to be embarking on that. You have the full support of the Office of Equity and Human Rights on that process, and specifically hoping that part of that plan involves established communications channels to racially and culturally specific communities. We can build on the work that was established at the Emergency Coordination Center in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we did establish a lot of channels to communities that we never had before. So again, you have our full support, and as the outward-facing Public Participation Bureau, we certainly want to support you in that work.
Thank you, Jeff. And to reassure you and everyone, we most definitely are going to build upon the lessons that we learned on that COVID response. Many of our members of our Bureau served in the capacity at the JVIC at doing outreach, establishing those relationships. We also, of course, have ongoing relationships with a number of community organizations, those some formal and informal, emergent, because we have people who work in the neighborhoods. And we were also central in making sure that our census count was accurate. And so we have a whole network of people that are connected in both with our communications infrastructure, but also in that capacity as well. So yeah, the strategic plan will have a robust communications and engagement sets of activities that are both internal to city government. So each of your bureaus will be reached out to. You'll be hearing about that pretty soon, but also an equally robust engagement process for community-based organizations and residents who generally are hard to reach. But thank you, Jeff, for your support.
Yeah, and thank you. And it was an absolute pleasure working with your staff at the ECC. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Commissioner Ryan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, but am I violating our timelines? I don't know where the time boundaries are.
You're good. We've got a couple more minutes.
And we'll have a bio break.
We will.
Nice. Is that the right way to say that? Okay, good. Where am I? I'm in a Zoom meeting with a gazillion people, and I wanted, Beth, there you are. And you did a really good presentation on the inspecting program, inspectors program, inspecting. You can correct me because I clearly don't know what it's called.
Neighborhood inspections program.
Okay, thanks. And then I loved how then Misha followed you and she talked about empowered neighborhoods. And what I'm trying to get at is I liked how there seemed to be a fluid connection between the two, because let's say we want to move away from anything being punitive and instead being restorative and being relational. And so my question is, how's that coming along? And government always needs, as was mentioned earlier, Jeff mentioned it just recently, how important it is for government to have partners on the ground that actually have those relationships with community, so that we have fewer legs in communication. That is a big word to describe many things culturally. And so I want to hear how the process is going in terms of building that network. And Leisha might have some more information on that with her team. And then Beth, what's it like for you to then work with Leisha's team to make sure that these are hand in glove? Did that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
I'll let you go first, Leisha.
Sure. So our cases or our clients are coming directly from referrals from Beth's team, and they have been really great in helping to identify folks who would fit the program kind of guidelines and requirements, who are needing that additional support and getting through the permitting process. And we have explored many other partnerships outside of our internal BDS processes, including working with the African American Alliance for Home Ownership, Taking Ownership PDX, creating those community connections where folks who are on the ground working with community members, homeowners, are helping us create resources and opportunities that benefit those homeowners instead of us always trying to center our processes and then trying to have them fit into that. And so that's basically what we're doing so that we can keep folks in place in their homes. A lot of our clients are elderly and they are seeking support and staying and aging in place as well. And so we are working to do that through all of the partnerships. We're hustling. We're trying to get resources, funding, anything we can, because construction costs a lot. You know, it's getting more expensive with the pandemic. And Amy, who's on the line as well and can add a little bit more, has been hustling to get these resources into the hands of folks who need them most.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Did Amy want to add anything, or Beth, did you want to add anything?
Sure. I can add a little bit. We develop, this program is really centered on the client. We create a team, an internal team that's dedicated to the client to get their permit through. And then we create an external team that surrounds the client with skills and talents and resources to help support that client all the way through. So we work with Portland Community College for architecture, Portland State University for engineering. We also work with Grummel Engineering and DCI Engineering, who also volunteer as well. And we have also volunteer architects that work as well. And so together we really support the client and their vision for their home, for their property, to address both the compliance case and really their needs as well. And then on top of that, we layer as much support as possible to help them get through the construction. So I'm working on a project right now for a community member from the Black community in North Portland. She has the only home that has not been gentrified on her block. And we're supporting her. We have 6 students that are working, 2 engineers. We're also collaborating with African American Alliance for Homeownership, who's doing the deep energy upgrades. We also are collaborating with the Housing Bureau, their lead abatement program. So the home looks, it's free of lead, it's been repainted, she has new windows. And then we move from there to using our new from excess to access reuse program. And so we're able to source the materials, the wood, to address the compliance case from there. So we're really trying to make sure that our clients are well supported, that this is their vision, and that we can assist them as much as possible.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Leisha. It really helps so much to hear stories like that, so we have a real good sense of where these investments are going directly. I really appreciate it. Okay, I'll stop and let my colleagues take more questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Matz, you're next.
Oh, thank you. As long as we were talking about the neighborhood inspection program, I just wanted to clarify something. I think this should be straightforward, but it might be a question for Director Kennard. I think the ask for the neighborhood inspection program is 1.2 million in one-time general fund. Could we pay for that with ARPA dollars alternatively?
It hasn't gone through an eligibility review, but it could. I would say that it could also classify as a revenue backfill, as the purpose is to, I think, support a subsidy for the Bureau due to loss in revenue. So we could also look at that route as well.
Okay, it might be worth at least fleshing out some of those options. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I think this is one of the programs we're just talking about. The Housing Preservation Program is really one of those programs that I know some dedicated city employee saw a need and created, right? And now we're building on that program because, of course, the need continues to grow. I'm going to go back to something that the mayor said at the beginning of this budget process, is that there are so many things that are on our agenda that are really good ideas if money is no object. But I'm not sure there is a logical way for us as the council and you as the budget committee to really weigh like what's like really good stuff, but is it core mission of the city? Is it helping us in coming back from the pandemic? And if so, who is it helping? Is it helping the people that were most devastated economically by the pandemic? And if not, why not? So it feels like, it's like each program in and of itself is great. But as you know, we don't have an unlimited amount of money. And if we're ever going to get the city to like say, these are the enhancements that we're making now, and these are the things that we do, because it's actually part of our core mission and we do it, we end up in this situation all the time. And so I just feel like I'm being put in a really impossible situation to say, like, whose sense of urgency is the most important sense of urgency as we invest limited dollars? And I don't expect any of you to answer that, but this program about the housing preservation, I will say this because I had a girlfriend who was a family that was facing the same problem, roof falling in, one of two houses left in inner Northeast with Black families that owned it. But during COVID, there was a company that actually would go out and actually bring professionals to do the repairs for those homes. And so, but when I hear about this program, the people who are doing the repairs are doing it for free. So I have some feelings about that. I'm not quite sure if they're being paid by someone else. So there's a lot of questions about it. And again, I know exactly why the program was created. It's in and of itself. I really applaud it, but I am really concerned that as we continue to do these pilots and then come back and ask for permanent funding and then keep expanding them, we continue to drift out of what our core missions are. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. And Art, I see your hand up. Did you want to?
Jessica was kind enough to direct message me the answer to Commissioner Mapps's question. So I just figured I'd answer it right here. So the request for the healthy business permit is 5.1 million. There's an additional $950,000 that is to support the permitting staff that support the small businesses. So those together make that $6 million that you might have heard that other figure.
Great.
It looked like Lisa Posey wanted to respond as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Yes, I just wanted to add on to that. I agree with everything that you just said. And I think that there was a need within our Bureau, specifically around the permitting processes that a lot of our community members are not aware of. Like, I have access and privilege, and I've been at the city for 6 years, and I had never really heard of BDS before joining the city. I did not know I needed a permit for a lot of things that happen in my home, and I've been a homeowner for like 20 years. So, there is this balance that you're talking about are we being duplicative? Are there other resources out there that we could connect to? And I think one of the things that Amy has been working so well at doing is identifying existing resources. So we are not recreating the wheel. We are looking for people who are already out in the community doing this work, and we are trying to supplement that work with the permitting process and helping those folks understand it, giving homeowners the knowledge that they need and the autonomy that they need to make those decisions, to not be preyed upon, hopefully, and to connect them with folks that can help. So we're not offering any of these free services. These are volunteers. These are legit architects who are seeing the need and they want to come in and provide these services. They're legit construction business owners who might have extra material that they want to donate to someone who's low income or disabled. And so if there's a better way that we can do that, even internally, like working with the Housing Bureau, working with Prosper Portland or whomever it may be, we're open to all of that. The ask that I think that we're looking for is that Amy is leading this work and has been doing this work by herself and has had to make hard decisions about who she can help, how she can help, when she can help them, and that another position similar to hers would help us to move people through, get them connected to the resources that they need to be connected to, so that there's an opportunity for us to save homes and save lives and get people to a place of being more whole.
I really appreciate you adding that to the conversation, Alicia, because I can't think of the guy's name, the name now of the company. But as you were talking, I'm thinking there's got to be a community-based organization that would partner and put in a PSEF grant to be the assessor to go out and actually, right? I mean, there's got and this is really, and it's not just for this particular one, because I always hear of these great pilots that crawl into being permanent programs without any kind of thinking about, are we the best people to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And if there's a better community-based connection, shouldn't we try to figure out who that is, right? So I really appreciate this conversation, because it actually, I agree with you. We should all think creatively, because we cannot do everything we want to do. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's better to think about who's better able to do some of the things that we would like to do, but we just don't have the resources to do.
Yeah. You may be, and I don't know if you're talking about Taking Ownership PDX with Randall Wyatt, but he is a partner of ours, and he is sourcing construction for Black homeowners specifically. And so we have been meeting with him and working with him, and we're happy with what he's doing, and we don't want to compete with him. We can't.
Right. Thank you.
Excellent conversation, discussion. Thank you all. We now can take a 10-minute break, and we will come back for the second panel on cleaning up Portland. So we will return at 3:47.
Thank you. We are in recess.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Excellent. Well, welcome back, everyone. For the record, again, I'm Andrea Durbin, Director for Planning and Sustainability at the City of Portland, and I use she, her pronouns. If the council clerk would please start the next presentation. We will now focus on cleanup issues in the city and the collaborative work that is happening to improve the livability of our city through these efforts. You will hear from 5 bureaus this afternoon about this work: BPS, PBOT, Parks, the Office of Community and Civic Life, and the Impact Reduction Team from OMF. We'll start with an explanation of how we're coordinating this work across the city and with other jurisdictions. And then we'll hear from these different bureau partners about our work to reduce the impacts of houseless camps, reducing trash and litter, removing and preventing graffiti, and protecting and improving assets and infrastructure. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. And next slide, please. We'll start with Quentin Bauer, who coordinates the public trash can program at BPS. Quentin, thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Excited to be here today. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk about our efforts to clean up the city. So actually, I thought we could start by just doing a quick round of introductions to different folks that are going to be speaking today. So I'm Quentin Bauer with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm the Public Trash Collection Program Manager, and I use he, him, his pronouns. And from the Office of Management and Finance and the Impact Reduction Program, we have Lucas.
Greetings and thank you for having me here, Mayor Wheeler and members of the council. My name is Lucas Hillier, and I manage the city's impact reduction program, and I use he, him pronouns.
And from PBOT, we have Dave Benson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Benson from the Bureau of Transportation. I'm the Group Director of Parking and Regulatory, and I use he, him pronouns.
Thanks, Dave. And from the Office of Civic and Community Life, we have Corrine Perkins.
Thank you. Corrine Perkins. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Livability Supervisor and for the Office of Community and Civic Life, which supervises graffiti, noise, and liquor licensing.
Thanks, Corrine. And Tanya from Parks.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanya Booker. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the Land Stewardship Division Manager for Parks and Recreation. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So for this presentation, we really centered our work on how livability was described in Mayor Wheeler's fall bump proposal, as you can see here. Improving livability was a key focus of that fall bump spending, and you will see its impact during this presentation. Next slide. So as we all know, this is a very large problem that requires a very incredibly large effort across all bureaus and across government agencies as well. So between all these groups, we coordinate very closely and partner in depth in a lot of different work. Currently, we're meeting every week with a Livability and Cleanup Coordination Committee, where all these different groups come together and troubleshoot and problem solve different issues. We also attend various problem solver meetings with various representative neighborhoods and community groups. So just a little bit about what each of these different bureaus and government agencies does. PBOT, their real focus is on removing abandoned autos and RVs, removing large items blocking streets, street sweeping, and maintaining our transportation infrastructure. The Office of Management and Finance runs the Impact Reduction Program and removes trash associated with people living outside. Parks removes trash from their properties, servicing the park's trash cans and leading volunteer cleanup events. Civic Life takes the lead on our graffiti removal efforts, and as well as educating community groups on available resources. My program at BPS, we run the Public Trash Can Program, coordinate community cleanup efforts, as well as regulating the waste system. Both BES and Water remove trash from their properties under their purview. And then outside the city, another key partner is Metro, who runs the Regional Illegal Dumping Program, and they're an incredibly important partner of ours. They remove illegally dumped trash that's not associated with folks living outside. And they also provide funding for our collection events. And now I will hand it over to Lucas.
Let's move next 2 slides, please. Thank you again. This is my name is Lucas Hillier, and I manage the city's impact reduction program. Over the course of the last 2 years, and largely as a result of the COVID-19 public health guidance and reduced capacity in several other agencies, visible urban camping and the accumulation of debris at many locations around town has reached historic levels. And this is a problem touching every corner of the city. Next slide, please. The impact reduction program is not designed to solve homelessness or the affordable housing crisis that we have in our community. Our goal is to reduce the impacts of those issues on public spaces. Next slide, please. As a program, we strive to recognize and honor the inherent worth of all people. We work through harm reduction to reduce the impacts of homelessness on housed and unhoused Portlanders and visitors. We effectively work to effectively communicate the rights of unsheltered individuals, the nuances of homelessness, different jurisdictional authorities, and the options available to our program for community members. We work to cultivate transparent relationships with service organizations throughout the city and work to provide responsive, thorough, and thoughtful, equitable service across the city. Next slide, please. Here's a brief overview and probably a refresher of how our workflow happens and the different levels of intervention that we provide. We first receive reports via the 311 intake system or PDX reporter. What that does is create a work order that dispatches Central City Concerns Clean Start folks who engage with individuals in encampments, remove camper identified garbage, and complete a risk assessment for my staff and I to review. The information on those risk assessments determines next steps. About 10 to 15% of the locations that we visit would be eligible for posting and removal. The remainder, we just kind of cycle back into the impact reduction work with Central City Concern and Clean Start. Next slide, please. Again, probably a refresher. Here's a list of criteria that we're looking at when we're determining which encampments would be posted. Looking for the amount of debris, any uncapped needles or sharps, the presence of hazardous material, taking into consideration ADA blockages or blocking public access, and proximity to schools and parks and safe routes to schools. Next slide, please. Here are a couple of examples of locations that we would and then locations that we would not post for removal. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see a couple different locations that we posted and removed in the last month or so. On the right-hand side, you see a location that we would just continue sending either Central City Concern or Trash for Peace to work with folks to manage trash in their space. Next slide, please. Prior to the pandemic, it was incredibly rare in the city of Portland for us to have more than 7 to 10 locations around town with encampments containing 9 or more structures. It was also very rare for us to have more than 5 or 6 locations around town that score a 70 out of 100 on our risk assessment matrix. Additionally, when we did get an assessment that came in the 70s or 80s, we would be able to expect that we would be able to remove and complete that project within 2 weeks. Recognizing these challenges, this year's regular budget allocation allowed the impact reduction program to double the number of Clean Start crews, going from 7 to 14. At the time of that budget decision, our response times with them were 8 to 10 days. And with those resources out in the field, that turnaround time has come down to 2 to 5 days. Additionally, resources in the most recent fall bump provided for more than doubling our capacity for campsite removal work. We anticipate noticeable improvement throughout the summer in the city and by late spring, and then continued improvement as we get into the fall. This has also, and this is really exciting, allowed us to redouble our collaboration and our partnership with Ground Score, Trash for Peace program. But I will talk a little bit more about that in a couple more slides. Right now, I'll pass it over to Mr. Benson.
Thanks, Lucas, and good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Dave Benson from the Bureau of Transportation. Next slide. In a little historical perspective, in 2017, and in response to derelict RVs in the right-of-way, PBOT's parking enforcement established the vehicle inspection team that engages with people living in vehicles in an attempt to find better solutions or moving vehicles to less impactful locations. Our efforts are in partnership with social service organizations, the Impact Reduction Program, and other bureaus. And it is important to point out that PBOT does not forcibly remove people who are living in vehicles. However, recognizing the vehicle and other camping is often in the right-of-way, we partner with the Impact Reduction Program and transfer approximately $1.3 million a year to them. Next slide, please. This is PBOT's parking enforcement officers and vehicle inspection team are responsible for addressing the issues of broken down and abandoned cars and derelict recreational vehicles. These programs work to identify, remove, and dismantle non-occupied derelict RVs and send abandoned cars to recycling. We also provide limited repair dollars for cars and RVs to include buying gas, repairing tires, or purchasing new batteries when these are reasonable solutions for the occupants of these vehicles. We currently budget more than $600,000 for towing and disposing of derelict RVs. And with the assistance of Commissioner Hardesty and Council, we added $636,000 to our budget, allowing us to double the size of our abandoned auto team from 5 to 10 officers. In terms of scale, we typically receive and investigate over 30,000 complaints of abandoned autos a year, to include derelict RVs, and tow only about 10% of these vehicles. This means that when our teams put a green tag on an abandoned vehicle, most of them are moved by the owner or custodian of the vehicle. Finally, the addition of 5 officers allows us not only to respond to complaints in a much timelier fashion, but also proactively look for abandoned vehicles. We typically demolish a little over 200 RVs in a calendar year, but this year, so far we are on track to demolish about 400 RVs. In terms of staff, in 2015, we assigned 3 parking enforcement officers to the abandoned auto function. Today, we have 20 of our 71 parking enforcement officers, or 28% of our staff, engaged in the abandoned auto and the vehicle inspection teams, and another staff member who manages the back of the house processing of RVs, bringing a total of 21 full-time employees engaged in this effort. And it's really a double whammy when we speak about parking enforcement officers, because of the parking citations that they write generates revenue. While working in these positions, they are not writing citations. Again, we greatly appreciate the dollars we have received to add abandoned auto officers, but the reality is that when we include the cost of redirected staff and lost revenues, PBOT conservatively self-pays $4.5 to $5 million a year for these programs from general transportation revenues. I'll now turn it back over to Lucas.
Thank you. Can we go next slide, please? So I'm going to pivot and just talk about trash in public spaces and some of the work that we do there. Next slide, please. Very excited about this amazing partnership that has grown significantly throughout the pandemic. Our ground score glitter teams are able to remove anywhere from 2,500 or 25,000 to 40,000 pounds of trash from active encampments each month, while also providing much needed work opportunities and civic engagement that values one's expertise and lived experience. Just recently, we purchased a decommissioned truck from the Bureau of Environmental Services And you all thankfully authorized us to donate that to this organization in order to facilitate their trash hauling activities. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were faced with historic challenges. City Council's historic investments are beginning to produce very significant results. We anticipate having a better idea of burn rate and any budget needs in next year's fall bump. And this time would like to pass it over to Tanya.
Thank you, Lucas. Again, I am Tanya Booker with Parks and Recreation. I appreciate the opportunity to share with Council our efforts toward the city's focus on livability, specifically our focus on keeping our parks clean and safe. Someone could advance the slides, that'd be great. Our base budget supports daily care and cleaning of our parks. This includes picking up litter and emptying garbage. This slide shows that when we look at labor hours contributed toward that effort across our parks in last fiscal year, FY 2021, we spent over 57,000 labor hours amounting to 4.4 million on daily care and cleaning of our parks. In addition, our base budget is used to clean up abandoned trash, often from people trying to survive outside. This accounts for how we spent over 250,000 in labor hours in FY 21. I want to thank Council for supporting the additional 525,000 we received for enhanced cleanup efforts this year. So far, we have spent over 184,000 in labor hours, and this has given us the ability to spend an extra 2,300 hours on additional cleanup efforts. With labor and equipment leases, we intend to spend down the rest of this one-time funding this year for trash and litter cleanup, as well as graffiti removal that would be deferred otherwise. Next slide. To give you a sense of volume, we removed over 15,000 cubic yards of trash last fiscal year. That's the equivalent of 1,735 household garbage bins of trash being removed from our parks each week. In addition, our deep cans, those are the type of garbage cans that you often see near off-leash dog areas. The deep cans account for another 132 tons of trash collected last fiscal year. In terms of funding and programmatic adjustments, we currently have American Rescue Plan Act funding to replace about 200 of our 838 trash cans with side opening and covered garbage cans. These are similar to the kind Quentin will show in photos in a few minutes. These replacement cans will increase the cleanliness of our parks as they are less likely to spill with garbage and are easy to keep graffiti off as compared to the concrete style cans that are in most of our parks. We put in another ARPA request to try to add funding to replace more garbage cans. The current ARPA request is for $205,000, and that will replace another 100 cans if we get that funding. Next slide. In other park cleanup efforts, this fiscal year, we have one-time funding in the amount of $150,000 to use on-call contractors to clean up park and natural area sites. We often are collaborating with Lucas and others on looking at these sites. The on-call contract work just has begun, and that is to look at the high degree of how abandoned materials and dump trash that happened during the pandemic. In the photos you'll see toward the top of the slide, that illustrates what these sites look like before the contractors come in. And the bottom left photo shows how clean it is afterwards. This is a new initiative and we are seeing good results. We may have more need to support the effort as we try to get back to baseline. I'll now pass it to Quentin from BPS to provide further efforts on trash and garbage cleanup.
Thanks, Tanya. Next slide, please. So another important aspect to our response to trash in public spaces is a public trash can program. This program has grown from 758 cans in 2019 to over 1,300 by the end of this year. The program is funded by the Solid Waste Management Fund, with fees coming primarily from a fee on commercial tonnage disposed from commercial accounts, as well as a small fee on residential franchisees. This program supports co-bid haulers. So those are women and minority owned firms. And we have a great partnership with Core Disposal, a Black owned company that services our East Portland and Southeast Portland trash cans. Next slide, please. So we are working on growing this program throughout the city. We recently completed a successful expansion into Southeast Portland, and we have an upcoming expansion in North Portland that we're currently working on that is going to be funded with American Rescue Plan funds. As we continue to grow the program, including increasing service frequency and quality, we'll need to assess the long-term funding requirements of the program. The American Rescue Plan funds have really helped the city expand the program, but ongoing costs will remain and are increasing. Next slide. We were very pleased to get some American Rescue Plan funding to also replace 50 kind of older, poorly maintained containers throughout the city, including the Pearl District downtown, the Lloyd District, Hollywood, and here along MLK. We're also going to use that funding to support 2 new Black-owned companies that will be hauling trash that gets left from around the public trash cans. Next slide. Another exciting recent project were these new trash cans up on Northwest 23rd and 21st. We partnered with the Northwest Parking District that used their parking revenue to replace the old trash cans you see there on the left, which were clearly not up to the task, with the new modern trash cans that have been very well received by the community. So those are 43 new containers throughout the Northwest Business District. Next slide. In addition to public trash cans, we also work to support community cleanup efforts. We recently hired a new cleanup coordinator who can support both community efforts and just community questions about how to get things cleaned up. We're working across bureaus to support all of these community cleanup efforts, bringing individuals, community groups, and businesses together to make a difference. We're really using this year to build a program that will serve more Portlanders and will continue into the future. Next slide. As part of that, we're providing support for community groups such as Solve, that has a grant with the city. They recently, or so far this fiscal year, have completed 242 events, 220,000 pounds of trash, and 4,500 volunteers that have been involved in cleaning up their community. We also support Adopt One Block that gets folks to commit to keeping their various blocks throughout the city clean. Next slide. Another project is supporting bulky waste removal. So really working on partnering with and funding community nonprofits to provide opportunities for multifamily households, single family renters, BIPOC communities, seniors, low-income households, and other vulnerable populations to dispose of difficult to manage materials such as mattresses, appliances, furniture, and e-waste. This is going to include collection events, free pickup opportunities, and property-specific disposal opportunities. We'll be providing funding to both nonprofits and co-bid companies to support that work. And our community cleanup coordinator will be leading that this spring and summer. Next slide. Lastly, we've really been working on creating new cleanup resources to make it really clear to the community and across government where to come and how we can help. We really do have a lot of great programs here at the city and in the community to help folks. So we've been distributing this flyer far and wide and speaking to groups and really getting the word out on how the city and how the community can help get things cleaned. We're partnering with Civic Life and other bureaus to communicate those available resources, coordinate with the Enhanced Service District program, and we have staff ready to help folks troubleshoot any issues they may have getting the help they need. And I will hand it over to Corinne.
Thank you, Quentin. Next slide, please. Again, I'm Corinne Perkins with the Office of Community and Civic Life. On this slide, you see a volunteer painting on a street mural. I'm not sure if they were repairing it or if they were painting it. However, we are pleased to partner in Civic Life with everyone interested in improving livability across the city. One of the livability challenges that has intensified during the pandemic is the influx of graffiti vandalism. We saw a wave of complaints come in March and April of 2020 as businesses closed and Portlanders isolated at home. This meant there were a lot less eyes on the street. During the midpoint of COVID about a year ago, prior to the vaccines being distributed, graffiti reports had spiked over 300%, and our average response time to remove graffiti was 3 to 5 calendar weeks. Next slide, please. Before diving into the costs and metrics of our program, I'd like to explain, as the slide shows, the workflow process for graffiti complaints and how Civic Life serves as the intake portal to administer in the city, and explain who is responsible for removal of graffiti vandalism. As this diagram shows, Civic Life is the centralized space to receive all graffiti removal reports. And when a report is made, we research the ownership of the property, notify them of the report and the code requirements to remove it. If the property owner would like assistance from our program to remove the graffiti, as you see in the center of this flow chart, those requests are prioritized for small businesses, nonprofit organizations, private residences, or assets that are tagged with hate speech or gang graffiti. I'm not sure what the slides are doing. Many cities, including Seattle, thank you. Many cities, including Seattle and San Francisco, do not provide free or low-cost contractor cleanup for businesses or nonprofits. Therefore, Civic Life's graffiti program is unique, as we do administer this type of free or low-cost service, and it's touted as a model for other jurisdictions. As you can also see in this diagram, there are a variety of city bureaus, including PBOT, Parks, Water, BES, and others, who are responsible for cleaning their own assets. Additionally, other asset owners, including the county, Multnomah County, Union Pacific, the railroads, utility companies, schools, and large businesses that are not covered in this program, and they're responsible for their graffiti removal efforts. Next slide, please. Thanks. Every day I meet with our graffiti contractors to prioritize new work orders as we receive thousands of cleanup requests in our office. This slide shows the recently vandalized Beverly Cleary statues at the Grant Park before and after the blue, purple, and orange graffiti paint was removed. There are two ways we administer our services. One, on-call response, and the second is proactive response. On-call responses are the direct response to the graffiti reports and work orders. Our office does evaluate those complaints, determines if the request is covered in our program, or as if I explained earlier, forward to another asset owner, such as another one of our city bureau partners. The second strategy in our program is our proactive response. Proactive response is when we have Civic Life contractor crews doing spot checks in areas that have historically experienced graffiti vandalism. During the height of COVID and protests, graffiti vandalism spiked. After every protest, our crews would follow the routes to the protests and clean up unwanted tagging, or more importantly, hate speech that resulted. We have been using this fiscal year's additional funding from council to provide contractor services when other agencies have exhausted their funding for graffiti removal. Most partners, such as Parks, PBOT, et cetera, have been the recipients of those subsidized efforts. In addition, we often work with business districts and neighborhoods who are organizing volunteer cleanup efforts, which include, and we also include free graffiti removal kits. Recently, we partnered with the Parks Bureau to establish and train volunteers to respond to remove hate speech quicker and to prepare the city for such large events. Next slide. In slide 4, there are a lot of numbers on this slide. This slide shows that the cost of graffiti removal support and reporting continues to increase. That makes the additional allocation from council this year of $3.4 million to enhance graffiti removal very timely and needed. You'll also see that our spending on work orders has increased from $152,000 in the first 7 months of 2021 to $393,000 spent during the first 7 months of fiscal year 21-22. There are two reasons for this increase in spending. One, we've seen an increase in the reports that our partner bureaus have been overwhelmed by graffiti vandalism, and the program is now absorbing the cleanup costs for other bureaus who've exhausted their cleanup funds. Typically, other bureaus do their cleanup using maintenance crews. And two, our program is now paying for prevailing wages, which I'll address on the next slide. It's interesting that in this fiscal year versus last year is that the total number of reports have grown from 6,127 reports to 8,894 reports this year. This can be attributed to the same graffiti complaints being reported to our office multiple times, and when not removed by the asset owner, are re-reported. Parks and PBOT regularly clean their assets through maintenance, as I said earlier, and track their graffiti spending using different methodologies in the Office of Community and Civic Life. We use square footage. They usually use people hours to remove that. We're hoping that all bureaus can begin to measure and track those metrics so we can build a more holistic, sustainable, and streamlined approach to remove graffiti vandalism and identify the areas where those services are needed. Finally, thanks to Council's added allocation, we have doubled our capacity as we've spent almost $700,000 this fiscal year. We are looking forward to carrying those funds over to the next fiscal year to continue the enhanced removals and to hire a dedicated office support specialist to continue coordinating and unifying the efforts for all bureaus. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, the cost of graffiti removal from our contractors has gone up. This year, we added 4 new contractors and COVID contractors to help us remove graffiti across the city. In this slide, as well in the photo of the volunteers removing graffiti from a light pole, they're wearing orange visibility vests, that we support. The Civic Life Graffiti program is piloting a intensive Old Town 90-day clean. That means our contractors are going through Old Town at least twice a week to clean up graffiti. However, as we began to introduce our new contractors to our system earlier this fiscal year, we were notified by procurement and BOLI that we needed to start paying prevailing wages for pressure washing and painting. The graphic below this shows the cost difference of what prevailing wage has done to inflate the price of removal from $659,969,000 versus this year to $1,650,000 that's projected for fiscal year 22-23 at the same level of effort. While it's more expensive, the other graphic comparing square footages from 261,171 square feet to 587,000 square feet that we're anticipating doubling our cleanup efforts. We're working to improve our educational and volunteer programs. And finally, I mentioned earlier that we often work with businesses and neighborhood districts, and that we're celebrating and collaborating with Old Town, PBOT, Parks, and other community-based organizations to intensify and move the needle on some livability issues that continue to exist in Old Town. Next slide, please. Cleaning up the city does take all of us. On this slide, you can see neighbors are repairing a defaced rack mural, which vibrantly depicted our community's support to standing with Black Lives Matter protesters and victims of that crisis. We also want to acknowledge with the image of a free graphic removal kit that shows a paintbrush, a can of recycled paint, and a paint tray that we're providing free cleanup kits at Metro on Swan Island, Miller Paint on Grant Avenue, and Powell Paint on Powell Boulevard. We distribute those, we purchase those kits, and we distribute them for free. Anybody can pick those up, and volunteers can click on the QR code and see how to remove the graffiti. There is a long, long list of the folks that the Civic Life Graffiti Program partners with to help restore Portland. And I won't read all of them, but I do want to call out that we are still working closely with the Portland Police Bureau, Problem Solvers of Portland, business associations, all of our partner bureaus, Downtown Clean and Safe, Park, and RAC, and other mural. We promote and direct complaints about graffitis to folks that can turn it into street art that is a deterrent to additional graffiti vandalism. Thank you. And next, I'll hand off to my friend Dave Benson, Peabody.
Well, we're on the home stretch, everybody. Just a couple more slides. Next slide, please.
I think the next is
oh, that's
we'll
not me.
Yeah, we'll go
Sorry.
ahead for the park slide. I think we're the next slide with the graffiti removal for parks.
2 back, I think. Here we go.
Yes. One more. Perfect. Thank you. So given that our park system accounts for 15% of the land in what we now call Portland, we see a lot of graffiti vandalism in our parks and natural areas. This slide shows some of the statistics from what we do. Last fiscal year, we spent over 3,600 labor hours, or the equivalent of $308,000 in labor hours toward the removal of graffiti vandalism. You can see by the year-to-date numbers, similar to what Karine just shared, we're seeing more removal this year. We're on track to spend more toward the removal of graffiti vandalism this year in our parks. We've increased capacity for this work by utilizing a contractor and have thus far spent $56,000 with this work with the contractor on top of the labor hours we're spending with their base budget. Next slide. I talked before about the Mayor's Enhanced Service Team. Again, this is one-time funding for this fiscal year. The Mayor's Enhanced team is helping us with some of this additional graffiti work. You'll see in the slides some of the work they're doing. They're really giving us a boost with the graffiti vandalism this year and removing them, taking care of some of the assets and signs throughout our parks, and particularly focused on some of the downtown core areas. This is work that would have been deferred without that funding. So we want to thank you for your support for the additional money this year to do that work. Now I'll pass it to Dave.
Thanks, Tanya. I do appreciate it. Next slide, please. Okay, Peabody owns roughly 600 older twin ornamental streetlights in downtown and the Central East Side business districts that are beyond the end of their service life and need replacement. Often we have found, especially in Old Town area, that the access plates have been removed and the electrical power tapped into is depicted in the slide at the bottom and the slide immediately to the right. That I might add is extraordinarily dangerous. Because of the campers, occasionally our crews need some help for the electrical crews to access the locations and make repairs. Additionally, inspectors often have a difficult time accessing bridges and other structures because of the camps that have been set up underneath the bridges, which dramatically slows the inspection process. Peabody Street Cleaning Program cleans 3,800 curb miles of residential streets and 985 curb miles of arterials, with the goal of cleaning curbed residential streets 1 to 2 times a year and main arterial streets 6 to 8 times annually. And the Central Business District gets cleaned on a twice weekly basis. Street cleaning is also responsible for the operation of an emergency truck to remove large debris in the roadway, fuel, oil spills, and other hazards. Unfortunately, all the sweeper positions are not currently filled. I know you are aware that the Maintenance Operations Division has had a rough couple of years due to budget cuts, staff reductions, hiring freezes, and the unique impacts the pandemic has had on essential workers. That said, we are now poised to start making real gains by hiring new line staff, additional sweeper operators, and most recently hiring a new group director, Jody Yates. Jody managed the sweeper program in the past and knows how to get improvements done, get the sweepers fully staffed, and deliver more service. In the meantime, we have added overtime shift to increase our street sweeping capacity. And next slide, please. Okay, Mayor Wheeler and members of council, this concludes our presentation. What we all hope comes through is that in response to the enormous livability challenges facing our city, there is a tremendous amount of cross-bureau collaboration, coordination, and cooperation that is occurring not only between the bureaus here today, but with other city bureaus and other private and public agencies. We appreciate the support we have received from council in terms of direction and dollars to meet the task at hand. However, what is also clear is that bureaus are often expending additional operating revenues to meet the challenges discussed here today. So you may see us return collectively or as individual bureaus for additional direction and budget support. Thank you again for your time, and we can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you all. Before we open up for questions and discussion, I'd just like to take a moment to thank you. The staff who presented today and their colleagues have been working tirelessly for the last 2 years under extremely challenging conditions, incredible barriers, and often challenges that are out of their control. And I think we can all agree that we want to clean up Portland. But I'd like to just personally extend my appreciation to the staff here today and your colleagues who are not here for your hard work and for the progress that we're making. So we will now open it up for questions and discussion to council, mayor, and budget advisors.
I wanted to see if our budget advisors wanted to go first, because I think we as council probably suck up all the air before they get an opportunity to.
Do we have a total dollar requested and how much available to fund the request?
I'm sorry, Sho, we can't hear you. You're cutting in and out. Maybe if you turn the camera off, we can hear you better. Sometimes that works.
Question is, what is the total dollars being requested and how much dollars are available?
Thank you. We heard you. That's a Director Kennard question.
Thank you, Sho. I think, so you asked for the 200,000 that's being requested. Is that, there were, I think that was in relation to the parks trash can proposal, I think is an ARPA request. Is that what you were referring to, Sho? Do you recall which part of the presentation?
Just overall.
Overall, what are the budget requests? Yeah, I think that actually would be really helpful just to remind us of the budget requests. I'm not sure if we could get a quick reminder from the speakers of the budget requests that are on the table, because I think a lot of this work, my understanding, a lot of this work is underway and funded through the fall bump, and there's not additional requests on the table. So maybe if the presenters could go back around and remind us of the budget requests that are in front of the council now.
We had a small request related to the 2 FTE positions that we will be able to carry over. So we're actually not asking for anything in this year's budget on top of what has already been allocated.
As Lucas, the Office of Community and Civic Life is not asking for additional funding. We are asking to carry forward the funding that's already been granted.
Parks and Peapod?
So for parks, for this particular aspect, you heard from Lauren McGuire earlier about some of the requests we do have. For the cleanup efforts, we're currently not asking for additional funding. With fall bump investments, we are going to be adding a number of FTE that will contribute to this work. And we're keeping an eye on the one-time funding for the dump site cleanup. That's the $150K. That's one time. We're keeping an eye on it. We didn't make a request right now because it took us half the year to get the contractor in place and begin the work about a month ago. And so we're just keeping an eye on that funding. The only request we have out there specifically for cleanup efforts is with the additional ARPA request to increase the number of replacement garbage cans that we might be able to add.
Thank you, Tanya. Dave, you want to go
Sure.
next?
So for PBOT, we have already been awarded a $1.5 million ARPA dollars for cleaning the right of way. And we may be asking for a little bit more money in future days for that. Beyond that, we asked for and received the money for the additional abandoned auto officers, that's $636,000. And I'd have to check with our finance person, but I do not believe we're asking for any more.
Thank you. And Quentin.
Yeah, the only request BPS has for cleanup work would be American Rescue Plan funds for revenue backfill for the public trash can program.
Thank you all. So I think we had Budget Advisor, Mr. Kevin Rogers next.
Hello, everyone. Just a couple quick questions, probably because they affected me personally, but regarding that urban camping issue, and you guys had about a $1.287 million budget to remove vehicles, motorhomes, whatever. What's that at an average cost per event? So how many events does that really take a year? So for example, I've had twice this year, somebody put a motorhome behind my house, which is really annoying. But so what does that cost per event? Because I can't be the only one in town that happened to. Or, you know, kind of an average cost per event. So if you've got $1.2 million, how many tolls is that? 100, 500? Just kind of.
So we lump together all the RVs with all our abandoned auto complaints. But I can tell you, last year we received 4,100 abandoned auto complaints. We towed them at a greater rate, or abandoned RV complaints, excuse me. We towed them at a much higher rate than cars.
Sorry, Dave, we didn't hear the number. You were gobbled, and then you came back.
Okay. Last year we had 4,100 derelict RV complaints. We tow them at a much greater rate than we do an abandoned car. In terms of cost, it's a little bit different than a car because a derelict RV has no scrap value. So we have to tow it and hold it for a prescribed period of time and then re-tow it to demolition. So we pay $87 a foot to demolish an RV plus towing costs. The average RV costs us $2,400 a unit to demolish.
Thanks. And then the other, well, two more things. One, we talked about the graffiti removal, and some people were doing square footage of total stuff painted over versus other people using man hours. It seems like man hours is kind of what the rest of the city uses. It seems like you guys can get that so we can have a standard unit of measure and not, you know, have to translate that in my brain. And finally, just for the whole presentation, so I'm feeling a little better. Sorry I was late today, but I had some work stuff I couldn't get out of. Maybe as a wrap up to these meetings, we can just kind of see like a bullet point with, you know, who requested money, what was the current budget, what's the ask, and, you know, that way we can kind of see maybe year over year. And again, that would just be kind of the presentation for the day, not just kind of everybody, because I think that would kind of focus our brain a little bit more. And that's about it. Thanks.
Great suggestion. I see Director Kennard taking notes on that suggestion. Director Selby is next.
First, I just want to thank Tanya for reminding us that where we live and work is a place that is now called Portland, and to everyone for this difficult, complex, and often thankless work. So many of the processes that you shared today are complaint-driven, which we know doesn't always give us equitable outcomes for myriad reasons. Lots of folks of color, immigrants and refugees, and other systemically excluded community members don't trust government or don't know the bureaucracy well enough to know who to call. So could you share any examples of initiatives that offer proactive solutions that aren't reliant on complaints? And what are your barriers to doing more of that?
So I'll jump in on this one, and I can talk about what our program has done to try to resist that call volume as a way we go about doing things. So, there could be one campsite report or 1,000 campsite reports for a particular location. We bundle those duplicates, and I don't even really see that data unless I go looking for it. So one report will create a work order for Clean Start to go out and assess an encampment, and 1,000 will create one work order. So we're able to, and then we have zones split up around the city so that each of our 14 crews have kind of an equal amount of space to cover. And so we're able to kind of resist that onslaught of like email campaigns from very civically engaged individuals. As far as proactive, that with encampments and homelessness, I think the idea of us being, like proactively searching out encampments gets a little touchy, but we have set up structures so that outreach providers and individuals experiencing homelessness themselves can contact Clean Start and even Rapid Response for bio-waste pickup. That won't necessarily result in a risk assessment and therefore removal. So there's a firewall in place when outreach providers and people in encampments contact our vendors directly for assistance with trash and hazmat.
Thank you, Lucas. I think Dave and Karine both wanted to respond to. Dave.
Yeah, Jeff, I really appreciate the question. Our vehicle inspection team proactively goes out and contacts people living in RVs and vehicles and to determine what their situation is. We work with social service agencies, the impact reduction team to oftentimes find better solutions for folks. In fact, our vehicle inspection team, when there's a medical issue, we worked with street medicine, and we've even taken people to the hospital when they need medical treatments. And we've tried to get people into better situations, and oftentimes that's resulted in finding housing for them. And so we get them in housing, and then we can get the derelict RV or the vehicle off the streets. So we do that. That's work they do every day.
Thank you, Dave. Karine.
I will add that part of our added or our spending of the budget increase, $636,000 of that dollars did get transferred from the graffiti allocation to transportation to assist with the RV removals. And so that's one thing. But to get to your question specifically, we are recommending hiring an OSS2. I inherited this program from Juliette Maraccioli, who did an excellent job for 6 years of administering this program. But we use our resources. We have very, very few resources. So we're trying to leverage the collaboration points. For example, Lucas sends me and my team messages when camps have been removed around an area that needs to be cleaned for graffiti. So we'll respond to that. So we're coordinating closely with them. And also we're adding that OSS2 so we can start tracking those metrics in a standardized, probably person hour methodology, so we can actually make sure that we are tracking across the board. At this point, that hasn't heretofore been done. So that's really our equity focus on that, Jeff. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Karine. Quentin.
Yeah, I think that's one benefit of having our community cleanup coordinator, our new staff starting. Her role is really going to be helping us do some more proactive work, identifying areas in high need of cleanup or other livability issues. So she's both going to be doing proactive outreach to community groups and organizations so they know about all the resources and where they can come for assistance, but also identifying the issues themselves and going directly to the person who can solve that problem.
Thank you. And Tanya.
Yes, I definitely appreciate the question. In parks, predominantly, we are the eyes and the ears in the parks. So in land stewardship in particular, we have 154 parks that we get to daily. And part of our daily care and clean is to assess for safety and also look at our assets. And so we report the graffiti that way into our work order system. For natural areas, a lot of our natural areas have had high impact with abandoned camp cleanup. And we do collaborate quite a bit with Lucas's program, with IRP. I keep forgetting the new acronym. And so I think it's a fair piece for us to all look at in terms of complaints coming in, and also hope that we are able to communicate how much we are collaborating between these programs and really talking as professionals, looking at the assets, looking at the work that needs to happen, and prioritizing. For instance, a lot of the work that we prioritize, working with heavy cleanup, really has to do with our ability to do work in a park or a natural area. And so coordinating those as high impact sites where we need to get those dump sites cleaned up.
Thank you for your work again. I appreciate it.
Great. So Commissioner Hardesty, you're next.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everybody for the presentation. It was only last week that I learned that PBAT gets deployed to do some graffiti removal and got to see the fabulous staff person at PBAT who does that work. So I guess I want to start by saying, Lucas, gosh, I've known you for the whole time I've been here. And let me just say that you are a remarkable man and you have an incredibly difficult job. And I just want you to know how much I respect your desire to balance the work that you have in front of you. You and I battled a lot in my time here, but I just want to publicly say you are a good man and you're trying to do really difficult work. So I want you to know I see that. So my question is that we continue to use terms like sanctioned and unsanctioned camps, which is a really not a good way to talk about camps. Some camps get services and some camps don't. And people they regurgitate the language that we use. And so what is the ability to get services to camps who today don't have the luxury of people coming to do garbage pickup or the luxury of having access to toilets and other supplies? How are we making sure that we are not just waiting for a camp to be overrun, but we're actually, as someone said, being proactive about the issue is the garbage? And I will tell you, when I walk out of my apartment complex and ask my houseless neighbors right outside what they need, the very first thing they say to me is garbage bags, right? Every single time I've asked them, it has never changed, right? So I think we can all agree nobody wants to live around garbage, right? And so the question is, how do we provide that service? Because those of us that are privileged and have a roof, people come to our house and pick up our garbage, right? To live in a tent, not so much. So how do we make sure that we are actually providing a service for people who need it, right? I mean, and let me just say, my neighborhood in East Portland, I can tell you that I don't see too many folks. Every once in a while, I see a crew come through here, but that is an exception and not a norm. And I know that I have neighbors who are business owners that are being fined because the sidewalks are being blocked and are being fined by the city, but the city is actually not providing any assistance to the business owners to help them keep their sidewalks clear, right? So the issue of garbage is something all of us agree on. We all want the garbage to be picked up. Is there a way to do that in the current systems that we have with, Metro is doing even more garbage pickup now. There's a lot of garbage pickup happening, but is it happening in the places that it should be happening?
Well, thank you for the question. I think I think we have a nascent system that is currently in a build out phase with Trash for Peace. So we have about 70 unique workers every month. And they have some coordinators who will go to a location and actually hire folks who live at the encampment and pay them a stipend to work in their space. And then that organization that we partnered with, was very skeptical before the pandemic of working with us, right? So we are strengthening that. And then it's really, it's probably a years long capacity building exercise with them, getting folks in comfortable, making sure they have transportation to and from their job sites, making sure they have the capacity to haul their own garbage. We provided them a truck, and I'm on the hunt for more decommissioned vehicles around the city to donate them. But I really think that model is probably the thing that gives me the biggest heart smile when I think about that and the restrooms over the pandemic. So I think. We're going to assist in any way we can to help them as an organization grow in capacity. But that does take a little bit of time and working through the growth spurts and growing pains.
Thank you. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thanks. I want to acknowledge all of you. This is a tough topic. Everyone can see. One of those who can see. see all the trash everywhere. And it's what all of our offices get calls about consistently. So I want to thank you all for taking on this tough work. And I can tell you're doing it with a lot of sensitivity, with, I can tell your heart and your head are connected on this. And it's not just a transactional job that you're doing. So I wanted to lift all of you for doing this tough work. Lucas, I just want to also pivot then to you. It was great the way you presented we got a sense of how the scaling up is taking place and how the investments that this council has made with a unanimous vote over the last two budget cycles, whether you look at last year's budget or the fall bump, you did us well by giving us concrete examples of that scaling up. I want to hear from you, top of mind, what are some of the main obstacles that you face on a daily basis or a weekly basis that maybe weren't in your presentation? So tell us maybe what you didn't want to tell us. We just want to hear, because it's really, really hard work, and Portlanders want truth telling right now. So is there anything that you could shed some insight into what it's like to do your job and your team, your growing team?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Ryan. I would say right now, today, this month, these last several weeks, it's the weather. Showing up at an encampment at 9 or 10 in the morning when it's 40 degrees out and raining sideways is just, it's really uncomfortable for the workers, for the people there. We try to provide enough time for folks to get up and get moving and start packing. And, that combined with, it's been, largely 2 years since we were really doing, robust campsite removals across the city. So there's kind of a reacclimation to that process with a lot of folks. I joke that we kind of spend the first 2 days at a location convincing folks that, we can ask you to leave and we're asking you to leave. And there's a back and forth with that. I'd also say, the lack of lawful locations for people to live and sleep across the city. I also say, and I don't know why I use the street Woodstock as an example, but the folks on 57 and Woodstock will love me this week and love this program, but the folks at 62 and Woodstock will hate us, right? Because we're just, we're kind of, we're trying to break up dynamics in certain areas. Maybe there's one or two bad actors in a group of 10, and hopefully we can kind of split some of that up. But really, with several thousand people sleeping outside on any given night, it is a lot of chasing our tail to some degree. And then finally, I would say, there are not very many, but a couple very large and outsized in appearance and role of just a really hardcore criminal element taking place at a very small number of encampments. We have found stacks and piles of catalytic converters, like tens of stolen vehicles. We have a space right now where there's about 80 stolen vehicles dumped, and the folks that had been camping in that area have actually moved to get away from that kind of criminal activity. And so when we pause for 2 years, largely there's just a lot of untangling that we're kind of in the middle of doing right now. And so that just simply takes some time. I would also say, lastly, that there's a tremendous amount of illegal dumping taking place. If we go back to slide 20 in the presentation, the cross levee property, I saw some very nice before and after pictures there, but I was out there just yesterday showing Nate Takara around that part of town, and it's just a neighborhood dump ground, right? There's household trash clear, household trash that's bagged up, bulky items, couches. And so, I think there are some in our community who found it convenient to just go dump a truckload of trash over by an encampment, and that has kind of grown to a thing of its own right now. And so, thinking about restricting access to these certain places for vehicles so that we can kind of get on top of that. But I would say that those are some pretty big challenges that we're facing right now.
Thank you, Lucas. And the last two obviously have some connectivity to the community safety system. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Who's the PBOT person? I can't find you on. Is
Dave Benson, I'm right here.
Okay, it's a question for you. When you mentioned that 10% of the vehicle removal was being towed, I believe the number was 10%. And then when I heard the figure of 2,500 per tow, that made my head explode a little bit. So is there a relationship between those two numbers?
Sure.
Is it 10%? Is it only 10? Is it 10% because that number is 2,500 per tow?
So there's two types of vehicles, and I appreciate the question,
Sure.
Commissioner Ryan. So for an abandoned car, we don't pay anything for the tow. There's scrap value for the tow. So the abandoned auto towers tow it, and then they go through a lien process and allows them to either scrap the vehicle, and depending on the price of scrap, they get about $150, maybe $175 per vehicle, or they can auction the vehicle if the vehicle has some other value. The $2,400 I spoke of, that's the cost of an RV for us to tow it and then demolish it, because RVs, again, have no scrap value. In fact, they cost money to dispose of, and we're paying that bill.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Seeing what you had to do, this elected official, I mushed it into it with all cars. So
But all right.
I'm so glad I asked a clarifying question for my own good. I was surprised that the number was so low at 10%. And so that's why I was trying to connect the dots between that and the expense. But I'll be able to follow up more on that later. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mapps, you're next.
Thank you. I know we're getting late in the day, so I'll try to keep my questions brief. And your answers can be brief too. First, I want to start though by expressing my appreciation today for the presentations that we received and the work that you do. This is one of the things that our offices hear about most often. And even beyond that, I think that just doing basic maintenance like picking up trash and cleaning up graffiti is an important part of asset management. This is what good government looks like. I'm going to have a couple of quick budget questions, and they're going to go to Parks and Civic Life and to Peapod, so you can prepare for that. First, I want to go to Parks. So on the park side, I see that we have an ARPA request for, I think, $250,000 for new trash cans, which is great. I also recall that last ARPA cycle, this council gave parks $425,000 for trash cans. And I was just wondering how many trash cans we got out with the first round of ARPA funding.
For that question, I'll take it for parks. So we haven't put any of the new trash cans, we haven't replaced any yet. Where we are in that project is we just had an analyst come on board and we are engaging in site selection. Part of our commitment is to do this with an equity lens. And so we're pulling together demographic information and also looking at parks, because there's been a lot of investment in new parks in East Portland lately, trying to make up for historical trends that weren't such. Some of our newer parks are in East Portland. And so we're evaluating where those new trash cans are already placed and where we want to put them, and ensuring that we're having outreach as we do this work, including with community, including with our field staff. So for instance, one of the other advantages, along with helping with community cleanup efforts and having our parks look cleaner and reducing graffiti. The issue with the concrete cans is when our workers pull these heavy, the trash has gotten heavier, just for all of you to know. Pulling the trash out, we get back injuries, we get needle sticks as the bags swing. And so we are gathering input from our workers as well as we do site selection. But the vendor has been selected, and we're going on to site selection. And we'll be putting our original plan, and we are following that timeline, was to get the first 200 replacement cans out by summer of 2023.
By summer of 2023, so
Correct.
Kind of a year-ish from now. Okay, thank you. Now I have a question for Civic Life, and if I may, I think I'd like to call on Director Montoya for this one. Hi, Director. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Hello, Commissioner.
Good. Thanks. I have a question on ARPA spending for Civic Life. I think in the first round of ARPA, this council gave Civic Life $250,000 for cleaning up litter and vandalism. Can you tell us, give us an update on that program and that spending?
Yes, we were really sensitive to the spend down rate that would make us a competitive in the next round. And so as the clock began to click and we were not able to spend that or stand up a cleanup program, we were considering the best uses of that. And we have recently figured out that I believe that PBOT in their cleanup program is better able to use those funds to add to their cleanup efforts. And so you'll be seeing probably in the fall bump a true up of that. If not, I don't think we'll do it in the spring bump. It might also be in a OEO process towards the end of the fiscal year. So that's where we're at with that.
Okay, so the for that $250,000 in trash and vandalism cleanup, we're going to kick that over to PBOT or something is the bottom line?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And now I have a PBOT question. I think in the last round of ARPA, this council allocated $1.5 million to PBOT for litter and vandalism. Do we know how many dollars have gotten out the door on that project of that 1.5?
Commissioner, I know that money was allocated towards street cleaning and garbage pickup in the right of way. So there's two components to this. One is I mentioned the emergency truck that cleans large items that are in the travel through lane, and then the street sweeping. And I did mention we are still trying to hire up to that, and so we can do more of that. And we are currently using that money for overtime, so we can do more street cleaning. And I think last time in the last section, you asked a question about garbage cleanup in the right of way. And we partner with Lucas and the impact reduction team, and we transfer $1.3 million annually to his team so they can do that. And Lucas can answer that question if you'd like.
So I'm not sure if I'm tracking. So the $1.5 million in ARPA funding that this council gave to PBOT is being used for street cleaning, has been transferred over to Lucas?
No, that's been using for street cleaning. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
No.
And we haven't spent a lot of that money down yet until we're able to hire more staff.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio.
Thanks. I just want to echo everybody and really quick. I know we're at the end of time here, but just wanted to, again, appreciate everybody for all the work that you're doing during this very challenging time. We just really appreciate it deeply. Really quickly, this question is for Quentin. I wanted to know all about the trash programs and how you mentioned Metro and that they're getting theirs ramped up again. Can you talk about how that's working with Metro and other jurisdictions, and are they also scaling up their programs too? Is there any sort of coordination happening? And then the last thing I'll say is I want to appreciate Quentin because we're getting a lot of calls and emails about trash, but we consistently get good emails and calls about Quentin in regards to trash and how he personally provides excellent customer service to communities and sometimes has been known to go over there and actually address something in person and is picking up trash himself. So I just want to say thank you, Quentin. You're going above and beyond. And that's all. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Commissioner. Really appreciate that. And it's a lot of times it's just calling Lucas or calling Tanya and having them solve the problem for me, and then I get all the good vibes from that. So thank you. Metro is greatly ramping things up with their regional legal dumping program. So they really, Lucas was talking about how his program was greatly impacted by COVID, but the Metro RID program as well. And overall, it was a positive day. We're using criminal justice, inmate crews to do the cleanup work, and really found that to be inequitable, and instead are paying living wage workers, and made that transition, and so they had to pause. So I mean, that's the right thing to do, but that really they went to a 45-day response time at one point, and now it's down to a 2-day response time, and we have those living wage jobs. So really making really great progress there, and we all coordinate really closely with the team at that program, and they're in most of our meetings. And then also we didn't mention about ODOT is also a key partner, and kind of same thing. They really, took a pause during COVID and weren't doing much cleanups along the highways. And they've got all sorts of new contracts and agreements, both on the graffiti front and the trash front. And so partnering with them is really important as well. Anyone else on the group have other bureaus they partner with or government agencies?
All of them.
Yes, lots of cooperation happening to address this issue. Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of our time today. I just want to express appreciation to everybody. I also want to thank Megan for driving the presentations today for both panel 1 and panel 2. And to the budget advisors, mayor and commissioners, thank you for engaging in this work, supporting this work. And I'll pass it back to you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Excellent presentations, good questions. I have a number of them that I'll just raise directly with the bureaus. Director Kennard's put in the chat here that we will be meeting again for our next budget session, the 6th in our series on Tuesday, March 29th at 9 a.m. when we will discuss housing and houselessness. With that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Director Durbin. We are adjourned.
Recording stopped.